And now, coming to you live from Huntsville Studios, it's Pop Culture Philosophers. And here are your hosts, Rockin, Robbie, Billups, and John Hammertime Holshoe.
Hey everybody, it's the Pop Culture Philosophers. Coming to you live from the Huntsville Attic in beautiful Huntsville, Alabama. Excited for tonight's show. I say that all the time, and then they backtrack, and I was like, oh no, I'm not excited or whatever. This time I really am excited because we're going to be talking about 90s horror. So we're going to talk about films of the 90s, some of our favorite, great decade for horror films. We did the 70s, we did the 80s, and of course now we're doing the 90s. So I really am excited because we're going to talk about one of my favorite directors, Sir Wes Craven. I've knighted him.
I don't think he's quite a sir.
I've knighted him. Of course, I'm John Hammertime. John, I can't... I'm
John Hammertoll.
I'm John Hammertime Holshoe. With me always, Rockin' Robbie Billups.
Hey, everybody, how are you doing?
I think
how are
we're
y'all
all
doing?
good.
Yeah,
There's more
great,
people
great.
here. I think Robbie was going to introduce those fine folks that joined us.
Yeah, probably. Okay, so with us tonight, and I'm very excited, John, along with you, to talk about 90s horror. We've done 80s, we've done 70s. Why not 90s, right?
Why not?
That's our era. We most vividly remember that. You know what I'm saying?
I also remember that was probably the time when I could start going to the theater. So I remember seeing these advertisements for horror films as a kid, but I couldn't go to the movie theater, and now I could.
Yeah.
I could.
And it was amazing.
It was a great decade.
And I have a good story. You know, we'll get into that. Joining us are other 90s kids, Justin Goldsmith, the third man.
What up? I'm back.
You are back. You've taken a little bit of a break here.
Yeah.
You've been gone for a little bit.
What was the last one?
I don't remember, but, before we got into that, we should have figured it out, but we didn't. So anyway.
I think you were on 60s Sci-Fi with us, which wasn't that long ago, to be honest with you.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't. Anyway, welcome back.
Time and space is relative,
You
guys.
excited to talk about 90s horror?
I am. Yeah. I got a lot of good stuff in here in my notes.
Good. We also have with us, returning, just Jeremie Day.
Just Jeremie. Just me. But it's great to be back, you guys. I was recently here, but I've always enjoyed the opportunity. And I like 90s horror, and I just like horror in general. So this seems like a good opportunity.
We always appreciate having you on the show, Jeremie.
Oh, yeah. I like being here.
I think he's all right.
Oh, well, you can get bent, but that's okay.
Oh.
Get bent. Like Rob Thomas said when he did the second album for Xbox 20. Get bent. Anyway, what?
Let's just scratch this whole show and start over.
Let's just start this over.
So let's just scratch this. We'll go to do the Michael Keaton podcast that we talked about.
Oh, man, we did not talk about that, John.
I have 0 notes.
Everybody's seen Beetlejuice.
You're right.
Yeah, no lie there.
You aren't wrong.
So we're talking about 90s horror. A lot of great films. A lot of
1890s, right? Because that's all my notes.
Was there a lot of 1890s horror films?
There were a
Enough
couple.
to do a podcast? No, 2090s. We're talking about horror films that we think are going to happen eventually.
2090s. That makes more sense.
Yeah. So in 2090, when they did Scream 12,
Yes.
they revived the franchise sometime in like 2070.
Yeah, they did.
Not related to the shitty MTV show. Anyway, 90s horror. 1990s, to clarify, specify, rectify, rectum.
Oh, my God.
What is
Sorry, I'm sidetracking here. So 90s, some great films, some not so great films, some return of some great 80s directors. There's a lot of garbage straight to DVD. We moved from the 80s straight to VHS to the 90s. Now you got the straight to DVD. So there's a bunch of garbage. Unfortunately, there's a lot of schlock in the 90s. But the 90s also brought some great new stuff. Most importantly, though, I think the really solidified the 90s or sort of stood out in the 90s or was the dominant, I should say, film type was the teen-centric horror films. You have movies like Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend. There's a bunch of other films that tried to capitalize in the success of Scream. I mean, Scream was huge and maybe probably the most popular 90s horror film. Whether you like it or not, it is. I mean, it was a very successful franchise.
Even Halloween, H2O, and Resurrection take that route, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, hey, well, we need this to less focus on the traditional. We need to have teens.
Yeah.
Let's set it in a school or something. And everything kind of went that direction because that was the popular thing. It became a little...
The Faculty.
The Faculty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the go-to. If you wanted money, you were teen-centric. That was the big go-to thing. I don't know if half of those matched the popularity or the financial success or the quality of Scream, unfortunately. But some garbage, but a lot of good films too. And a lot of those films, by the way, we were talking about Urban Legend, got multiple sequels, and people forget that they had sequels or they were straight to DVD. Because some of these films that were not good still made money, so if they got sequels, and for no reason, for no good reason.
Yeah, no kid.
So what are some of the, what do you think defines 90s horror to you guys? Because I said there was a teen-centric, but what, in your mind, really defines 90s horror? I'm going to start with Jeremie. What do you think defines 90s horror? When you think of 90s horror, what pops in your head?
Basically, like, they took the slasher flick to the next level in the 90s, I think. In the 80s, you had a little bit of it, like, burgeoning. And there was, like, some, like, I guess, a few. But then in the 90s is where they kind of doubled down on it. Of course, Scream was there to, I guess, influence it. But, I mean, even with stuff like, A New Nightmare. So, a classic slasher flick, of course. But, I mean, it had a place in the 90s amongst all the other slasher flicks that were coming out then.
You're right. You got sequel to those slasher flicks from the 80s. There's the new Halloween, the new Friday the 13th, the new Nightmare on Elm Street, and then you've got new franchises like Scream.
And I Know What You Did Last Summer and all that stuff. But I think that was the time where, there was a teen aspect of it, but they really doubled down on the whole slasher idea. And, it focused a lot of, like, slasher teen scenarios, a lot of teenagers getting cut up. But I think that's what the 90s defined horror as.
Oh, absolutely.
What about you, Robbie? What do you think? Do you think it's really just slashers and teen horrors?
I think the biggest thing that really separates the 90s from the 80s, and there's a lot of, like, I don't know, like, just cinematic type things, just the way movies were made at that time, I guess, or whatever. But the biggest thing is that, in the 80s, they had the slasher films, right? But they all had a tinge of the supernatural. Jason was a resurrected dead person, right? Yeah, literally in Jason Lives, even if you go that far. Michael Myers is the boogeyman, Freddy is like this dream demon in a way. But in the 90s, they really like focused in on...
Did you say in a way? Because he is.
He literally is. But the idea that they took away, they stripped some of the supernatural in the 90s. It seemed like people were kind of already a little too desensitized to the 80s horror. It got a little too goofy. It got a little silly. It got a little too familiar, right? If that makes sense. And so they wanted to go real. And it seemed to me like what defined 90s horror is the idea of the psychological thriller. You get what I'm saying? Like movies like Silence of the Lambs, Jacob's Ladder, Seven, those are horror films, and they use every single trick in the book that a horror film uses. It's just a real to life serial killer, like Silence of the Lambs, that's based on the Ed Gein stuff, right? Which Psycho was, and so was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it paints it in a more realistic way, even though both of those movies are not supernatural, and so to me, the 90s kind of lean out of that. It leans in a little bit more into this world where, we feel like, we feel like everything's okay, everything's hunky-dory. What we're scared of and fascinated by is the guy next door who can literally come and kill us. Freddy doesn't scare us anymore, but our neighbor does. That's the 90s to me.
I agree with you there, especially you're right, Freddy had been watered down until Wes Craven came back and did A New Nightmare. Jason's the same way. You're right. Halloween especially, that was not the intention for John Carpenter to be this like zombie god like Jason had become.
Well,
that's what the franchise had spun into without his control.
But he was always meant to be the boogeyman.
Yeah.
Even from the beginning. That's why he gets shot up like so many times by Donald Pleasance's character, Loomis, and he's gone.
But then you got the crazy cult shit from Halloween.
Well, that was definitely not Carpenter's intention.
No, that's what I'm saying. It went in this different direction.
That was the producer's cut.
Yeah, and so these characters are not so scary because they're not real. You're right. And the psychological, well, even the Scream films seem a little closer to home because when you find out who they is, they're real people. They're not ghosts. They're not magic.
Yes.
These are actual people just putting on costumes, murdering people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's done pretty horrifically. If you go back and watch it, holy crap. Goldsmith, what do you think defines the 90s as far as horror films?
It's like the stuff before it was goofy, but it seems like the goofiness really picked up in the 90s, especially because
You think it picked up?
Yeah, because like with like the Child's Play movies and New Nightmare was really meta and it had a bunch of jokey stuff in it. The Scream movies are riffing on every other horror movie. I mean, I
get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, there was funny stuff in previous movies, but these, I guess maybe because they were teen centric, they tried to throw more actual humor in there.
Make them, they're definitely more self-aware.
It's more like levity and stuff.
Yeah.
I think.
But two films you described, though, are also brought to you by horror master Wes Craven, who had done all the shtick before. So he's like, I think he wanted to do something different or make his films smarter. You know what I'm saying? How many, he did more original stuff, like People Under the Stairs, but to revisit the slasher genre or bring Freddy back, I think he had to go in that direction. Very great director.
Yeah.
Smart guy.
I'm sure we'll be talking about him a lot.
Yeah.
We might be. So we kind of got stuck in this. You said that earlier, the Jason and Freddy and everything. There was definitely that franchise hell. It seems like a lot of these 80s that were easy to milk franchises. When you hit the 90s, these franchises definitely staggered. Not that we didn't see multiple Scream sequels and multiple I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then I Still Know, and holy shit, I fucking know what you still did last summer.
Yeah, but
that was the third one.
You had Freddy's Dead.
Freddy's Dead.
You had Jason Goes to Hell.
Jason Goes to Hell. So some of these, when those franchises weren't extremely successful,
Curse of Michael Myers.
yeah, then they started to be like, oh, we need to do something different. But initially, starting the 90s, it was just a same old continuation.
Well, because
These franchises made money.
Yeah, they made money to a point.
Yeah.
Right? And then you had too many Friday the 13th movies, too many Nightmare on Elm Street movies, too many Halloween movies, right? There needed to be something new that came along.
Yeah, there had to be something to deviate from the norm because you can guarantee money to an extent.
I don't see the franchises restart until Scream. Or I guess Candyman kind of counts, right? And that's a little supernatural, so that kind of goes against the norm.
Yeah.
But Candyman was not the biggest success of the 90s in horror.
No.
Silence of the Lambs, Jacob's Ladder, for instance, like I was saying with the psychological thriller idea, and those are horror films, right?
Yeah.
So, that's where it immediately went to. So it went from, the cheesy 80s stuff, and it was stagnant, and it was done. And then it went into those movies. And those movies were so important, they were getting, notoriety. Academy Award-winning Best Pictures. You know what I'm saying? Silence of the Lambs, right? And so then with Scream, you get the franchise coming back, and you get the idea of them trying to reboot the franchise. Jason Goes to Hell is an attempted reboot. Jason X is an attempted reboot. You know what I'm saying? New Nightmare is an attempted reboot. H2O is an attempted
Jason
reboot.
X was not 90s.
It was not. You're right.
But Jason Goes to Hell, was that a reboot or their attempt to fucking slam the whole franchise into the ground?
Well, I don't think they intended to do that, John. I don't think that was their intention.
Okay. It's pretty terrible. The first 5 minutes are amazing.
It's what happened, but and they sold the hell out of those foil Jason masks. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, from
the Jason Goes to Hell, because it was on the cover. It looked 3D and silver.
But that mask is never in the film. That's just the cover.
Never. But, dude, did you own one of those? Because I did.
No, I didn't have the chrome.
I did. Don't you want one now?
No, I wanted one that looked like the movie mask. I like the original movie mask.
But you remember the poster, though, where it had the snake coming out?
The serpent coming out, the demon or whatever.
Oh,
I'm like, that looks amazing.
Snake from Hell.
I was
That's
so
fun
excited
stuff,
until
man.
I watched the goddamn movie and found out the purpose of that demon. I'm like, this movie's fucking terrible.
The movie's terrible.
The first 5 minutes is amazing.
Jason X may not be 90s. Neither is American Psycho, but it definitely fits in that 90s mold.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't quite go into that 2000s mold yet. But that's just me. But yeah, to me, Scream relaunched the franchises. There was a rise that happened there, but there was also some false starts on trying to reboot franchises. And as great as movies are like H2O and New Nightmare, it didn't spawn new movies,
Well, I think New Nightmare...
H2O had Resurrection, and it was pretty bad.
I think New Nightmare was Wes Craven's basically closing out. I'm going to come back, do this right, and close out the series. I think that was his intention.
Well, that was the last one till the remake, wasn't it? Or Freddy vs. Jason.
Yeah, but of course, that might have been his intention, but New Line Cinema, who owns Freddy, was like, this is great and all, but we're still going to make some money. So then that's where you get him coming back.
Well, based on the plot of that movie, you wouldn't think that he was trying to close it out, because the whole point of that story was you got to keep making Freddy movies so he'll stay trapped in the story. Spoilers.
That's true. That's true.
That is true. I think that is an attempted reboot, man.
I don't know. I don't think that was.
I just don't think it
that
was successful.
I
They
don't
set
think
up
that
like
was
a whole new story and mythology for him and everything. Where
Yeah.
like he's like this ancient entity. You know what's really crazy about it though? It's almost like it. Like Freddy's it in that. Real talk.
Yeah, I
He's
get it.
because he's like an entity
And-
that is like kept around by like thoughts and stuff like that. It's weird, but I mean, it's definitely an attempt at a
Well,
reboot.
that was his inspiration before he even made the first one. You know what I'm saying? And he explored it in that movie. Now, I don't think that that Ridley Scott. I don't think that Wes Craven intended to do more Freddy movies, but I think the studio, it was Dimension, right?
New Line
Yeah.
Cinema.
New Line.
The house that Freddie built. New Line only. That's why they're success. That's why they
Didn't
have money.
Dimension get a hold of that?
No.
At some point? No. Dimension did the Michael Myers stuff.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of. But I don't think Wes Craven intended to do more, but I think they intended to do more.
I mean, they did set it up to do a sequel based on that whole concept, and they didn't. Instead, you got the reboot, which is garbage, and you also got Freddy vs. Jason, which is actually a rip-roaring fun time.
I don't
by
think
the
it's
way.
that good, man.
It's a fun with the fight. The showdown is so much fun. It's not a good film. It's a fun film.
Okay.
But we'll leave that be because it's not a '90s film. So besides the what defined the '90s in talking about the different genres and stuff like that, we also there was the Family Freddy. When Freddy Krueger went door to door knocking on people's doors. No, I started to see more. So watch Scream and watch the first time you see Drew Barrymore killed, and it's graphic. Then watch all other teen-centric films that took place in that era, and it almost looks like they're cut for TV, even though they were theatrical.
Yeah.
It seems like they started toning down the violence a lot.
The violence and the sex.
Yeah, it definitely, and there's no pointless. I mean, you can argue it's pointless not or nudity, but all these films, even if it didn't need it in the '80s, there was always that.
Yeah, they cut that out.
Yeah.
Like even in the Jason movies, once they hit that late '80s period, we're hitting the Tipper Gore era. You know what I'm saying? And she's going after groups like NWA and stuff like that, right? That affected movies.
Yeah,
It really did.
they definitely toned down the violence. You don't have nudity, and then the violence is just I don't know. They're still making horror films, but they really do a lot of the stuff feels like now again Wes Craven bucked that trend. Wes Craven's like I'm Wes fucking Craven, so I'm gonna do.
But nothing that Wes Craven did in the 90s tops some of the stuff that he did in the 70s and 80s as far as gore-wise, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, things like Last House on the Left, the Nightmare on Elm Street, that bed sequence alone, the bedroom sequence alone. The whole bed spitting blood out when it sucks in Johnny Depp. That stuff is not in Scream. That stuff is not in Vampire in Brooklyn. That stuff's not in I Know What You Did Last Summer. It's not.
But Scream was also trying to go for more realistic kills.
But even like
those
best
kills are detailed.
Even the most successful and critically acclaimed horror films of the 90s, like Silence of the Lambs and Seven, don't go that far into gore like they used to, right? And the sex is definitely toned down in the 90s.
Definitely, yeah. I agree. I
But
mean,
it
they definitely
seem, affected horror in some
and
kind of
I
way.
wonder if they're trying to approach a broader audience. They're saying, hey, we don't have all. It's scary, but it's not as violent.
I honestly
We don't
think
have nudity.
I honestly think times are good in the 90s. We've done these podcasts before, 70s horror, 80s horror, right? Now we're doing 90s. To me, horror is defined, the great waves of horror are defined by times of turbulence in American culture, right? The universal stuff happened at the Great Depression, right? The sci-fi horror, giant ants and the alien stuff happened during the Cold War scare, right? You had Suspiria and Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre happening
70s, yep.
in the 70s post-Vietnam. Then you have the post-9/11 era, right? But the 90s were kind of a relatively cool, calm, and collected time in American culture. It really was.
Desert Storm, I guess.
There was Desert Storm, but that was not a threat. Like,
It didn't feel like a threat because it's so far away.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
it's
It
like
didn't
right
feel like
over
it was
there.
a threat to us.
And it wasn't Vietnam. You know what I'm saying? Which is what we grew up reading about. There was no direct response to anything, and I think these films kind of represent that. It's a good time, so I think the movies of the time kind of represent that just a little bit. And maybe we were as a society getting a bit prudish at times because I think, like I said, don't underestimate the effect of Tipper Gore's basically crusade against gangster rap. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't underestimate the effect that had on wider pop culture of the time.
But did you know that she wrote People Under the Stairs, that Wes
No,
Craven
she did
directed?
not.
Everybody look that up. So she's a little more demented than people give her credit for. What do you think about the family friendly and do you feel like some of it was toned down in the 90s? The violence, the sex and the violence.
I mean,
the
yeah.
sexy violence.
I mean, yeah, everything you guys been saying, it was a I mean, that's when I was a child, so things were pretty cool for me. I didn't watch these movies at the time because I was, born in '89.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
We've been talking
Yeah.
about these movies, and we're mentioning things like Silence of the Lambs and Scream and stuff like that, but we also don't need to forget that this is the decade that gave us Casper, Addams Family, The Haunting. Do you get what I'm saying?
Gremlins 2.
Gremlins 2. The great
Yeah.
Gremlins 2.
Do you know Gremlins 2 was originally NC-17? They had to tone it down.
No, it wasn't.
What would possibly...
The bathroom scene with Robert Picardo with the female gremlin.
They
I think
remade the
went a little
Gremlins
too
too, and
much.
they had all the dongs hanging out everywhere.
Oh, that's right. We're talking about toning down the sex, but there was
They
that
were
sexy
prosthetics.
gremlin.
This is practical.
She's
So-
like putting on makeup and stuff.
So, Jeremy, what do you think about sexy gremlins?
I mean, not quite my type, but I respect other people's interests. I think in the 90s, they took a different avenue when it came to horror. They were going more for the psychological approach, I'd say, rather than just like, hey, here's a bunch of gore. Isn't this thrilling? They were like, no, we'll tone down the gore, and basically they were picking their battles. So they could reach a wider audience, but still like getting your headspace without sacrificing too much. But yeah, I mean, they definitely pulled back on the gore there.
Yeah, because even Silence of the Lambs isn't that particularly gory.
No, it's just
Yeah.
got disturbing, I guess, scenarios that
Yeah.
I think a lot of the horror comes from what you conjure up in your head, and they were kind of
Yeah.
like doubling down on that. I will say Seven's got some it's got some graphic scenes, but
It does, but they're few and far between.
yeah, it's like they make it count when it happens.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much what we can take from the 90s when it comes to that. It's like they make it count more so.
Yeah, it's a really good point because they stop focusing so much on the how people are getting killed, and they really hone in on why.
Yeah.
Part of the psychological thing.
Yeah.
So, they're also, with Scream and with some of those films, they also became more self-aware
Oh, yeah.
and more cognizant of the rules and the genre. Scream especially, but other films, I mean, it definitely became, when you talked about New Nightmare, I mean, in itself is really meta. You know what I'm saying? And they're like, oh, well, it's a film, et cetera, et cetera. It's a great concept. But they definitely saw that shift in the 90s to films that were aware of the rules, kind of tongue-in-cheek, aware of themselves. Definitely saw a big jump there, too.
Because you have the Wes Craven stuff, right? Like New Nightmare and Scream, obviously. But you also have like Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, where, he's like lawnmowering away an army of zombies. And it's like, that movie's not scary, but it knows what it's doing. And it's playing on those tropes, right?
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the, not the Night of the Living Dead, what's the sequel not made by George Romero, the guy that did those other ones?
Return.
Yeah,
of
it
the
reminds me of
Living
those
Dead.
Return films a lot, because those Return films kind of went from that dark comedy to just bad, because somebody
Yes.
else was doing them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he Brain Dead definitely went in that same direction.
yes.
It was very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah. Known as Dead Alive to other people, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Dead Alive. Great film.
Hey, that guy would go on to win an Oscar
Yes.
for Return of the King.
Who
Well,
would
that's kind of weird to think of. It's like, hey, man, here's all this horror, but Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, right?
I wonder if that was the film they saw that were like, oh, dude,
Well,
this
I-
guy needs to do Lord
You
of the
look
Rings.
at Lord of the Rings and like the orcs and stuff, and you're like, yeah, I get it. I get it. I see it.
There's
I
some
see it.
horrific stuff in there.
Yeah.
And why do you guys think this era end? Because we definitely had this at the tail end of the 90s. We've got Japanese and Asian film culture like The Ring and The Grudge, and those being remade. So that sort of like bleeds into the 2000s. That was a big dawn of that. And then on top of that, we definitely have the tail end of the 90s. We get the Blair Witch was the found footage. And then we get a lot more films like that, clones like that. So that sort of happens at the tail end of the 90s, bleeding into 2000s. So this era definitely changed. Why do you guys think that there was this prolific change between the 90s and the 2000s as far as the horror film types?
Me first?
Justin. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was looking at you, but I guess people listening can't tell.
Yeah.
I'm looking right at him.
I think
We're in a giant white room in the nude, and I'm staring right at him.
with my dong hanging out. No.
Well, that's you were
Let's
in
call
the
back
nude.
to earlier. No, but
I'd fuck me.
I'm glad you brought up Blair Witch just now because I think like without doing more research, this is just what I was thinking about a
thanks for
little
not
while
doing any
earlier.
research
No,
when
I
you
did.
came on
I
the
did
show.
some, but this is what immediately came to mind earlier. I think that really the Blair Witch made Hollywood or directors in general, filmmakers think what could horror movies be.
Oh, that kind of opened the door like, hey, we don't have to follow this formula.
Yeah.
These guys went in a different direction. And by the way, Robbie and I worked at the theater then, and you had people that thought this was based on real fucking shit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which blows my mind how ignorant they were.
Well, the
And
internet
then-
wasn't a big thing back then.
That's
You
and
couldn't
true.
that's successful marketing.
Yeah.
And B, we've had more throw up, people vomiting because they had issues with the motion sickness.
Yeah.
We had a lot of people get sick in that, not because it was terrifying, motion sickness. I don't want to clean up vomit out of a,
It was one of my most unique movie-going experiences, though, was watching that movie.
Yeah.
I just watched it the other night. I'd never seen it before.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
How does it work? Because to me, it doesn't work as well like watching it on your TV.
I can definitely see why people may have gotten nauseous watching it because of all the found footage films, and it may be because this is the first one. It has the shakiest camera, I think. Like there are scenes where it's just straight up the camera staring at the ground. I'm like, I understand it's supposed to be a found footage thing. It's supposed to be realistic, but this is unnecessary. I don't know. I don't feel the point. I don't like
Well,
this.
it was Dan Merrick and a handful of people walking around in the woods with cameras.
It's not a bad movie. I just don't think it's that amazing. It's like it's about a good C+.
Well, but the point that I was making is that it was so different from everything before it. It really, I think that's where horror movies started to change because after that, it's pretty much just like
yeah, that was the very
people
tail
falling
end
into
of
wood
the
chippers
90s.
and
That was the very tail end of the 90s. It definitely, we got a lot of found footage and stuff in the 2000s. It didn't influence so much on the 90s because it came at the tail end, but we did see Cloverfield and stuff like that. That whole art style.
well, not
and-
just that,
and-
but like all the Saw movies and
It definitely
stuff
helped.
Like that.
It did help in the style of the 90s and into the 2000s.
the
Yeah.
teen-centric slasher film
Yeah.
and the psychological.
And I guess that was kind of a teen-centric movie too because they were college students.
Yeah, I guess so.
What about you, Jeremy? What do you think? What do you think that ended? Do you think it was Blair Witch and the Japanese films that were bleeding into the American
I like how
film
you
culture?
see that in.
What? I really do think that those films.
No, that's true. Yeah,
that was a big
that
part
was
of
John's answer.
Ringu and Audition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's about the little lizard, right? Ringo.
Ringo the Lizard. No, I mean, I think
That changed horror films
that
forever.
that definitely helped bring us into a era where we were more accepting of foreign horror. Because there's a lot of good foreign horror. I don't know if
There
you guys,
was, and it seems like it
just didn't
it
get
wasn't making it over here, and we got a lot of remakes too.
Yeah,
Like, dude, this is popular overseas. Let's remake it. And how many? There was a lot.
because I mean, outside of Japan, there's like Italian horror, which is brutal. Mexican horror. Guillermo del Toro. He might have actually. I think he was probably outside of Japanese films part of paving the way for
He might have been.
bringing that, I guess, foreign horror to us. Because like his first foray into American audiences was Mimic.
Oh yeah.
And it wasn't well received because it was, you could tell it was like half Guillermo plus half of the director or half of the executives and stuff saying, hey, we want these things in your movie. But I mean, it got us introduced to these foreign affairs.
And before he did that, he did Kronos.
Yeah, Kronos
which
is
a
amazing.
great film.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, he did Devil's Backbone, which I think is probably his best film.
We talked about doing director podcast, and we're definitely gonna do a Kubrick one, but we could do a Guillermo del Toro podcast.
I mean, there's like 2 Hellboy movies alone to work off of. There you go. I mean, but
And a Blade movie.
in a Blade movie,
And Pan's Labyrinth, which is one of my favorite films of all
That's a
time.
great movie,
I
yeah.
love Pan's Labyrinth.
I don't know why that's not my favorite of his. It's okay.
Get the fuck out.
No, we'll. Bye.
We're escorting Jeremy out. Shut the door here. Okay. So Robbie, what do you think defined? What do you think ended this 90s, the psychological, the teen-centric slasher films?
In short, 9/11. Like, I was talking about how Vietnam spurned a whole new era of film, horror film in particular. And, of course, in the Great Depression and the Cold War era, we had some stuff. I really think that 9/11, and I really like what Justin said about Blair Witch, about the rise of the found footage, the depressing of that teen comedy type thing, you know. American Pie was rising, but the horror movies were getting away from that. And I really think that 9/11 added this new tension into America, where it led to what the next wave was which was kind of like torture porn in a way. You know, movies like Saw, Hostel, and they influenced an entire wave of film that I think ended with new films like that went back to supernatural, like Conjuring and stuff like that. But that's more where we're at right now, I guess. But yeah, I think 9/11 had a big impact on that.
Have you seen like there's a couple movies that are like banned even in America in most places, like the Poughkeepsie tapes. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
It's like they actually kill a guy or kill animals or something like there's a bunch of weird shit that
You talking about snuff films, man?
Yeah, are you talking about stuff?
but that like
A lot of that is coming out of foreign horror. Like a lot of it's foreign.
yeah, but it was I'm pretty sure that stuff was like early 2000s too. So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's in America, like we're talking about American movies, you know, and in American cinema, that coincides, and maybe it's a coincidence, you know, but I think it just happens too many times throughout our history of the great waves of horror, to me, which are the 30s, the 50s, the late 70s, and then literally like the early 2000s.
Yeah, well, I think you'd have to be, you know, like tone deaf or just not cognizant of culture if you kept making the same thing. When something like that happens, obviously it changes people's perceptions. So obviously you have to change direction, whether it be... but films are still good. Even if you go see a scary film, stuff like that is good at helping you get away from the real world.
Yeah.
Whether it's a comedy or horror film.
You know, maybe the idea, too, is that in the 90s we were obsessed with the realness of the serial killer.
Oh, yeah, getting more
maybe
close to
9/11
home.
got too real.
Yeah, you think you're right, and
You
so
know?
people wanted more fantasy, and that does explain the monsters and going back to the
I mean, it
demons
was still more real people. Like Hostel and Saw, that's real people, but it goes back and more into like
fantasy,
into like the fantasy like structure of a horror.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it had to change. Why wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So I think
Before we move on to another subject, I want to clarify the Poughkeepsie tapes came out in 2007, and it was so realistic that people thought it was an actual snuff film, and it got banned in a lot of places, but it was not.
Is that a Blair Witch scenario again?
No, well, yeah, with the misinformation or whatever, people being confused.
it wasn't those tapes though where it was like it's not found footage bullshit, right?
I've never seen it. It's
I don't
on
think so.
It's on Tubi, but it's like it's tapes that a serial killer.
What's Tubi?
It's a streaming service.
Or not to be?
Good joke. Let's move on.
I think Robbie.
Yeah,
was
real
some-
quick. Let's go over music.
Let's go over music because there's some great soundtracks and some great scores to these great 90s films.
You know, and that's a big thing. It started in the 80s, the idea of the soundtrack in addition to the score. Like the Freddy movies had like the Fat Boys and stuff like that on it.
The licensed music.
Yeah, Dawkins, you know, we're the Dream Warriors. You know, and that kind of continues on into the 90s. But like, I really think that horror films are so great because they utilize every bit of cinema magic. One of those is the score. And I think there are some amazing scores in 90s horror films. What are your favorites? Jeremie?
Oh, okay. So, and I knew this actually going into it sort of, but the score for The Frighteners, because it is definitely Danny Elfman.
That's a Peter Jackson film.
Yeah, it's Danny Elfman.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that when I first saw it, but I could definitely tell, like, he has a very, very strong signature style. Like, a lot of high notes and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But I love that score. And I mean, I love that movie, but that adds overall to it. And of course, the score for New Nightmare, J. Peter Robinson, I think, is the
I'm not going to argue with you.
It's got a great soundtrack, but it still keeps that classic.
Yeah, it's still very Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, Nightmare.
But it's modern. And
I like that.
I like it. I like the approach of that.
Did you say Nightmare on Elm Streety?
What?
What you said?
Yeah, I was. I'm bad with words. What do you want from me? Anyway, yeah, I really like the modern approach on a classic that you get in a New Nightmare.
Yeah, it's a little bit of new and a little bit of old, and it works well.
Yeah,
I'll
nice little
agree
mix.
with you. That's one of my favorite soundtracks of the 90s.
Speaking of a modern approach on a classic, what about you, John?
I actually can't hear music.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sad.
Yeah, just music. I can hear words. No, so New Nightmare. No, I'm a Wes Craven fan, but I think they just killed it. In addition to that, the Scream soundtracks all of the Scream soundtracks are really good, especially Scream 2. And that's not just the
It's
score.
got
They have a
Cottonmouth
bunch
Kings
of
on it.
It's got a bunch of licensed music,
Yeah.
Everclear. It's got a bunch of licensed music, and it's phenomenal.
And in part 3, they got that Creed song. What if? What if? What if?
I mean, all Creed songs sound like that, so I don't know what
They
song
really
it
do.
is.
don't they?
I couldn't remember.
No, the Cottonmouth Kings were on Scream 2, I believe, with Suburban Noise. Maybe Scream 1. But yeah, it's actually a good soundtrack.
It's a phenomenal soundtrack.
Yeah.
But as far as the score goes, probably New Nightmare is probably one of my favorites. And as far as licensed music, definitely. But Scream 2 also had some music that was licensed, but it was original. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, here's a new Everclear song, but it's not like it's just, oh, we pulled this off the album. They have a bunch of songs that were exclusive
Yeah.
to that album, which
Like
is
they made it for it.
Yeah, which is mind-blowing, including, I'm almost positive that soundtrack has a song called Rivers that is by
Sugar Ray.
Sugar Ray,
Yeah.
but it's about Rivers Cuomo.
It's either Scream 2 or Scream 3.
It's Scream 2.
Okay.
So it's called Rivers. It sounds like a Weezer song,
Okay.
but it's Sugar Ray doing their impression of Weezer.
Yeah.
And when they used to play it live, the lead singer of Sugar Ray,
Uh-huh. Mark McGrath.
Mark McGrath would say, "This is my late friend Rivers Cuomo," when he poured out a beer. Like Rivers was dead.
Ha.
Rivers is alive and well, by the way.
Maybe it's just a robot. Speaking of robots, what about you, Justin?
Hello.
I was very robotic when you said that.
I did that on purpose.
You're an actor.
And that's how I got into Juilliard.
Way to ruin the joke.
The cooking school, Juilliard cooking.
Yeah. Did you? I like the New Nightmare music. I love the Hellraiser music. There's one that's been stuck in my head, and it's really messed up because I had to write this out of my. I don't consider this a horror movie anymore after doing all my. I had to cut some stuff out to
Jurassic
make my
Park.
list. Well, I didn't even think about that. But
It's not a horror film.
Fallen. Do you guys think Fallen's a horror film?
With
with
John
Denzel
Goodman,
Washington.
Denzel
Yeah.
Washington?
Ooh.
Yeah, because
Yes.
I mean it's a demon.
Yeah, that's a horror. It's like a mystery horror. Or
It's a
something.
psychological thriller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But whoever the demon is in is always singing, "Time is on my side."
Yeah.
The Rolling Stones, and it's just so. That's like one of my favorite musical elements to any movie from the '90s. Is that you can tell who the demon's in by he's singing the song.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that a lot. Me personally, I'm going to go Alien 3. The score by Elliot Goldenthal. I love that movie. I think it's haunting. I think it's probably one of the best scores out of all of them, except for maybe Goldsmith's score for the first one. Not Justin,
welcome.
it's Jerry. Speaking of Jerry Goldsmith, Gremlins 2 has a score by Jerry Goldsmith, which is absolutely fantastic. It takes exactly what he did from the first Gremlins film, but it really amps it up, and I like the score for Gremlins 2 a lot better than 1 because it's faster. Does that make sense? That it's a little bit more up-tempo. Marco Beltrami did the Scream soundtrack. I love that one. It's a great use of like these like ethereal choir sounds with a more modern and classic approach to the stringy psycho
What
type
was that?
thing. Speaking of Marco Beltrami, he worked with John Ottman on the Halloween H2O movie, and that's probably my favorite score of a horror film in the 90s. It takes John Carpenter's music, but it makes it a big, full orchestra, and it just fills the room.
So
You
it's
know
no
what I'm
longer a synth; it's actually an
Exactly.
orchestra.
It's a big
of the
thing,
Same music.
and it's John Ottman, and it just works so well. It swells and it envelops the ear. Does that make sense?
I agree. H2O had a phenomenal soundtrack.
Absolutely, right? Speaking of soundtracks, we'll be back, but we won't be singing. Here on Pop Culture Philosophers 90s Horror, we'll be talking about our favorite villains from horror films, and we'll be talking a little bit about Wes Craven when we return on Pop Culture Philosophers 90s Horror.
Welcome back to Pop Culture Philosophers. We're talking about 90s horror, and I'm kind of interested to see who are your favorite horror villains, bad guys, or whatever you want to call them, in the 90s, because there's some that I think have returned from the 80s that are popular, but there's also some original standout ones. So I'm actually going to start with Sir Justin Goldsmith. He was knighted on the break.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Queen lives here in the studio. She was so kind to knight him. So, Justin, who are some that some of your favorites? I guess they don't have to stand out,
Yeah.
but the ones you enjoy, some villains, some bad guys you think are awesome that stand out to you that are 90s.
Well, I really like the two bros from Scream. Like, they got one of my favorite scenes at the end where they're like stabbing each other, trying to make it look like
it look like that they were also attacked.
Yeah,
Go
Shaggy's
along with the story.
Shaggy's got a really good scene.
Shaggy, damn it!
It is Shaggy.
The graboids from Tremors, if we're calling that a horror movie.
Yeah, they're bad guys. They're villains of the movie.
Pennywise from It.
Oh yeah, the 1990 made-for-TV It came out.
Yeah.
I forget, and Tim Curry does a phenomenal job.
Spiders from Arachnophobia. The House from House on Haunted Hill.
Dude, the spiders, that almost made my top 5, but it gave me the creeps. I don't like spiders as it is, and Arachnophobia just gave me the damn creeps.
Yeah.
Skin crawling. Ugh.
Yeah. And Gary Oldman as Dracula.
Oh yeah, and Bram Stoker's
Just
Dracula.
Great. I guess you'd call him the villain of that movie. He is Dracula.
He is the bad guy, and he's got great makeup and great costume. Like the set design is amazing. So he stands out as being very, very big on screen.
Did you say the spiders from Arachnophobia?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just got back in the room.
Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
That movie freaked me out when I was a kid.
man.
You know, I
It
was
freaked
trying to
everybody out, I think.
like
I can't watch it.
Jeff
without having to
Daniels
check
is
my
in that movie, and John
blankets.
Goodman, right?
Yeah. John Goodman's the exterminator.
I haven't seen that in forever. I definitely should.
creepy.
I was trying
So
to make
fucking
myself
creepy.
decide whether or not it was a horror movie, and
Oh, it is.
It is.
The name of the movie is literally a horrific
Fear
of spiders.
I mean, I would have that after seeing that, so yeah.
Yeah. It's again, I hate spiders, and it was a hard one for me to watch. It just creeps me the fuck out.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeremy? Some of your favorite villains,
All
bad
right.
guys from the 90s.
All right, so we got Ghostface
Oh yeah,
from
Scream.
Scream, which is multiple people, but
I just love that it looks like a generic Halloween costume.
yeah, it's just like somebody decided to start murdering people in a
Yeah,
costume they
and
got
it's-
from like Party City.
Yeah, and because you would, if you're on Halloween night though, I mean that costume wouldn't, you wouldn't raise any questions.
So you start getting stabbed in the chest.
You would go to Big B, your drugstore. They sold that costume. You remember the Ghostface thing? That was like a costume.
Yeah.
And they even had the goofy version of it, and that was what was in Scary Movie.
Yeah. With the face. The spaceship from Event Horizon plus Sam Neill getting possessed.
yeah.
Of course, Freddy. I mean, he makes it. I mean, he's still 90s relevant.
Yeah.
He's still up in there.
And get specific. The whatever demon that took over, because it really wasn't Freddy in New Nightmare.
Yeah, it's like
Well, Freddy's
some
based
entity-
on a demon.
whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Freddy
Yeah.
as a villain. The Graboids, yeah, and Tremors is definitely a horror movie. What else is
Yeah.
it?
They say in that movie it's because they made Freddy like Santa Claus. Like everybody knows him. All the kids know him, so he's real. Like it's the idea that with enough willpower and thought, something can become real. Like emotions are real things.
Yeah, he's like a thought form. That's kind of why I said he's similar to It almost. He's like some kind of an ancient horror, but given like life by like thought.
He very much is, yeah.
I think that's it. There's like a few. I guess Hannibal Lecter.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah,
Not the
honestly-
comedian.
You guys are
Hannibal
going to take
Buress.
all of
Yeah,
mine.
Hannibal Buress. You like?
The comedian.
It's like, why would you do that? Anyway, I think that's pretty much it for me.
How about you, Robbie? Now that you're back, and then nobody saw this, but Robbie had to move his DeLorean across the street because he was double parked.
I thought I had to move my dick across the street. Anyway, first of all, I got
Because
written here.
it was your dick double parked.
I got written here Hannibal. Mostly because Anthony Hopkins does such an amazing job with this.
He does.
this role.
He's a great actor in general. He's one of those I put up there as being one of
Oh,
the
he's
greatest actors
amazing.
of all time.
I also have Dracula by with the Gary Oldman performance. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'll go a little bit further than Freddy and say Pennywise. Tim Curry's Pennywise from the It miniseries. Yeah,
I said
did you say
Pennywise
that?
earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I wasn't here.
That's a good one.
That's when you're moving your dick across the street.
Okay, so then I got two I don't think anybody said. Mohawk and the Brain from Gremlins 2, the new batch.
Oh yeah.
No, I absolutely love it. Like, what's scarier than the Stripe Gremlin, the leader of all Gremlins?
Or when he turns into a goddamn spider.
When it's Mohawk and he turns into a spider.
Yeah.
And then the one with intelligence.
Yeah,
the
he
Brain.
was it's so well spoken.
I wanna
Yeah.
be
Yes,
a
the
part
singing.
of it. New
Yeah.
York.
And then he got
I
that
don't-
show Frasier.
Yes, right. Absolutely. No, but those would be the ones I would automatically say. Ghostface also is a great, even though it's not one person, it's pretty much two people in every movie except for part 3. It's just one person.
Spoiler alert.
Spoilers. It's the director. But what is Wes Craven saying there? We'll get to that. But anyway, that's what I got. What about you, John?
I would say you pretty much covered them. So we talked earlier, Freddy. Jason is great in the first couple minutes. Jason goes to hell.
Oh.
And then what would become Jason is garbage. But Ghostface definitely felt like one of those classic slashers, kind of bring it back, and it worked consistently. Chucky continues to be it started in the 80s, it continues through the 90s. Chucky, even though he became sort of tongue-in-cheek meta, the later Chucky films, I was scared of him as a kid. Like, dolls kind of freaked me out anyway. So this idea of a killer doll.
Yeah.
And then Candyman, we didn't mention.
Tony Todd.
I totally forgot about Candyman. I didn't watch that a lot as a kid, so I just forgot.
Tony Todd has got such a great performance in that film, man. It's so amazing.
And he's made appearances in a lot of other films. In
Final
smaller
Destination.
parts.
Yeah. Which I really wish was a 90s film because it's just on the cusp. It's like in 2000 is the first one came out.
I hate that fucking movie.
What?
I find that movie incredibly unbelievable.
Well, I mean,
that's coming from me.
Death is coming after these teenagers and random people. I mean,
it's going the most elaborate way to do it, dude.
It makes a Rube Goldberg machine out of death. You're right.
It's got to make a goddamn, it's got to do that.
It's like
it can't just like crash their car. That one dude just got hit by the car. That was a great scene.
Yeah.
That's reminiscent of the John Ritter scene in Bride of Chucky, which I think is early 2000s, right? But that scene when he jumps out of the truck and gets... Is Bride... Yeah, Bride's not 90s.
Yeah, it's 90s.
I think it is, yeah.
It's either 99 or...
It's 98.
It's not, yeah.
Well, that's a great death scene,
tail end.
and we'll get to death scenes because it's not part of the show. We'll get to that in the PCP After Hours.
Oh, by the way, the thought form, there was a word for it that I was looking up. It's called a tulpa.
Oh, interesting. I mean, it's a real thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I believe that. I 100% believe in thought forms.
Yeah. Moe's barbecue makes great tulpas. You got to try them. They just have this. They use this sweet sauce.
So what you got? Ghostface. What else?
I
still
think
a
I said
Ghostface.
Chucky and Candyman.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Speaking of Ghostface, from Scream.
Yeah.
I think we all sort of agree that Wes Craven was sort of the king of the 90s.
I would say that, we started this and I was like, Wes Craven is the king of the 90s horror, right? Two of the movies I was thinking of took place in the 80s. Serpent and the Rainbow and Shocker. Both of those 88, 89. But in 1990...
People Under the Stairs.
People Under the Stairs. Then New Nightmare. Then Vampire in Brooklyn.
Yes.
A misstep, but not a misstep by Wes Craven.
Wes Craven wanted to be a horror film.
So did Eddie Murphy.
And the film producers wanted a comedy. Like, it's Eddie Murphy, it has to be a comedy.
Yeah.
This is a film that one of the producers jacked up.
This was Eddie Murphy's attempt to do something other than comedy.
Yo, I like that movie better than Bram Stoker's Dracula or Interview with a Vampire.
I can dig that.
I don't even give a crap about those two movies.
I can dig that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think Bram Stoker's Dracula is the most authentic to the book, right?
Yeah.
Which I like. What was the other one we were talking about? Oh, Interview with the Vampire to me is just a hodgepodge. It's Twilight in the 90s.
It's dumb and rice stuff. I hate it. It's what gave us stupid Twilight.
Really
dumb and rice.
Really melodramatic.
No, I get what you're saying. Then he did the 2 Scream films, and that's his 90s output pretty much. But yeah. I mean, and Music of the Heart was in there as well. Not really a horror film, but probably like in the midst of all this dude who has cemented his career on making horrific films. He does Music of the Heart.
Yes. It proves that he can do more than just horror films. I think that was more of him proving he can do other genres and be successful because it's a good film and it was done well.
Yeah.
It just proves he was a talented guy.
He was born in 1939 in August of 2015. Sadly, he passed. We were all there. We all felt that loss. We did a whole tribute to it here on PCP. I love Wes Craven. I think his career is amazing. He started out doing horror films. He was an English professor, right? Wasn't that what it was? It was like
he was an English professor, and he saw that he could make more money in films, and so he went to film.
I think originally he went to pornographic films.
Yeah, I was trying to leave that out because there was money in porn, but he really liked...
I mean, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, he really liked the concept and the genre of the horror film,
but
and he gravitated towards
pulled
that.
out of that, and then he wound up doing horror films. He did Last House on the Left.
Yeah.
And it was kind of panned because it was kind of like graphic, right? And he was like, "Oh, I don't know if I really want to do this." But then a friend of his, I think it was Sean Cunningham, who wound up doing Friday the 13th, was his like partner at the time or something, told him that it's really cheap to film in the desert, so we did Hills Have Eyes, which I think cemented him.
It's a great film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he goes on.
Bizarre and dark and terrifying.
He does the nightmare stuff. It's based on an actual idea. He read a bunch of newspaper articles about people who died in their sleep after saying they were being terrorized by this like dream demon type thing, you know, and he took the idea in that movie about taking reality and what's the difference between reality and a dream, right? Then he takes that idea further and he goes, what's the difference between a dream reality and a movie that I'm making for you? He does that in New Nightmare. He does that in Scream, right? So he really kind of revitalized himself in the 90s. People Under the Stairs is cheesy. It's goofy. So is Shocker, right? Serpent Under the Rainbow, which, of course, this is 80s, but it's late 80s. But Serpent Under the Rainbow is one of his best films and really underrated, in my opinion. I love People Under the Stairs. New Nightmare, he gets meta in the 90s. He's an excellent director. What are your recollections, Justin, on Wes Craven, his career, your favorite moments in movies or whatever?
Well, I was going to ask you if you ever watched Wishmaster.
No, was that him?
He had something to do with it.
I think he was a producer on that.
Maybe that was it.
He wound up doing more thrillers as he continued on, Red Eye. And he actually didn't he direct the second Hills Have Eyes remake? Like they remade Hills Have Eyes, and I think he directed the sequel to that.
The sequel with the military? Yeah. I don't know if he did that, to be honest with you. He had a producer credit.
Now, his last actual role directing was Scream 4.
Yeah, and 4 is, I know it's not 90s,
4 is
but
great.
People need to check it out, because Jeremie said he hasn't seen it, or doesn't remember if he saw it.
4 is
great. If you haven't seen it, 4, because I love 1, I love 2, I think 3 is okay. And 4 is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
So it's a return to form, and Wes Craven at his best.
Before we get to the Scream stuff, Justin, what do you think about Wes Craven and his legacy?
What? His legacy or the 90s? I mean, he's...
As a director.
His 90s work and his legacy.
Yeah. Well, the only stuff I've actually seen from him in the 90s is the Scream movies and New Nightmare. But, I mean, he's going to be...
You haven't seen People Under the Stairs?
I haven't.
Oh, my God.
Oh.
Yeah.
You need to watch that
It's
movie.
such a bizarre
Got the
film,
kid
but
from
it's so cool.
what Mighty Ducks
Sandlot.
in it.
In the Sandlot. No,
Yes.
he's not.
He
is
in
in
Mighty
the
Ducks.
Sandlot.
He's in the Mighty Ducks and the Sandlot.
Yeah.
He's in all the sports movies in the 90s, and he started out in a
It's
horror
also
movie.
got
It's
Booger
weird.
from Revenge of the Nerds in it. He's the dude that he befriends who lives under the stairs with no like
Oh,
tongue.
That's him?
Yeah, that's the dude that played the violin and the.
What? I never
I'm
made
pretty
that
sure
connection.
his name is Snot, and I'm pretty sure he's an American Dad.
Yeah, him. Yeah.
He got the same damn role.
I didn't realize that was him. I guess he's in makeup and stuff, and he's got the hair and everything. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, and he's not very talkative.
I thought it was Donnie Wahlberg. Or am I thinking of something different?
Oh my god.
What about you, Jeremy? Your recollections on Wes Craven's work in the 90s and his legacy in general?
Oh yeah, I think his 90s work is amazing. I think I've seen pretty much all his 90s films. Yeah, I mean, I've seen People on the Stairs. I love it. And I think going forward, his legacy is probably solidified in the fact that, you know, we got the whole slasher genre out of him pretty much. And I mean, it's not as popular these days, of course, but I think we're making a return to kind of like slasher films. So, I mean, he set us up for that. And I think,
He was definitely riffing off of other people like, you know, Alfred Hitchcock and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
He did the slasher thing, did John Carpenter, Halloween, and all that stuff. But he was really focused in on the idea of the monster inside, right? He was like, there's a monster inside all of us, and if we don't recognize that, this dude was an English professor before he was a porno director, right?
Yeah.
And so, like...
He only jumped ship because there was so much money in film.
He knows these themes.
And
to
the
me,
mess.
the number one theme that he's exploring in these films is the fact that any one of us is a bad day away from being the people in, say, Last House on the Left, or a bad lifetime away from being the people in Hills Have Eyes, or just a bad afternoon away on some bad weed to be the guys in Scream, you know? And with movies like Scream and New Nightmare, he's exploring that idea. He established in the Nightmare franchise, of which he also co-wrote Dream Warriors. And I want to point out that that's the movie where the dreamers start really fighting back.
Yeah.
Right?
It's one of the great films of
He's
the series.
exploring not only thought forms, but the power of us as the lucid dreamers in the world of the subconscious where the thought forms exist. Do you get what I'm saying? And so he explores that very meta-like in the Scream movies and in New Nightmare. It's no longer about the division between reality and dream, but it's about reality and fiction. What is the difference? To him, there's not really much, because a story a story repeated enough creates a thought form, which is an entity which represents something that can leech onto a subconscious, or it's just in your head. You get what I'm saying, John? So like, what do you think about that? Like, what do you think Wes Craven is exploring? What do you like so much about his work?
Well, I think he has some original concepts. I think he was very original. When you look at when Friday the 13th came out, the first one, it was an original concept. But the subsequent sequels, and when you get Jason, he's very much kind of a knockoff of Michael Myers. Let's admit it. And I think Freddy was very unique in his creation and his style. So I feel like he kind of went in a different direction. Like he wanted to do a slasher, but he didn't want the same old, same old. So I think he's a lot more creative.
They all started off as slashers except for Freddy. Freddy already started off supernatural.
Yeah.
Me personally, I like the supernatural over the psychological thrillers.
Same.
You'll be able to tell that in my top 5 for the 90s horror, because I do respect the psychological thriller, but there's a difference to me still, because I don't like calling something horror that's not necessarily supernatural, though I do account for it. Psycho is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Right? That's not supernatural, So I really respect that. I just think that like Wes Craven does such a great job of letting us know that this is all inside of all of us. And every time someone was like, how dare you do this? Like people saying whatever they're saying about the Joker movie right now, right?
Yeah.
But that's inside of us, And if we don't explore it through our fiction, if we don't explore it through our creativity, it comes out in other ways, more dangerous ways. In fact, that's what the fucking movie The Joker is about, dude. When you're not able to express yourself, when people aren't listening, So Wes Craven found an outlet for his demons, and he's encouraging us to do the same. And I think that's very, very powerful.
Is Joker a horror movie?
No.
It's
a psychological thriller, though.
You gave us a Joker quote earlier with that you're one bad day away from. That's like a Joker thing.
Well, in the new Joker movie, he didn't just have a bad day, y'all.
He had a bad week.
He had a bad life.
Yeah. I mean, and then on top of that, I mean, you're right, but he was also cognizant of the time. So when Wes Craven changed his style in the 90s.
Is that why he was more successful than other horror masters in the 90s?
Yeah, I think he realized that what had changed. He couldn't do the same old, same old. He had to change it up a little bit.
Because John Carpenter had some good movies in the 90s, but none of them were really successful.
Yeah,
right?
He didn't have the success he found in the 80s.
Argento didn't have that success. Other directors, Romero didn't really have that success.
Clive Barker.
Clive Barker?
Yeah.
What success did he have
The whole
90s?
Hellraiser.
He directed the first Hellraiser film, and he hates all the other ones after.
Yeah, the Hellraiser was in the 80s, the first one.
He did Nightbreed in the 90s, but that was not a popular... Yeah, it was in 87 was the first Hellraiser.
Yeah, it's an 80s film.
Never mind.
You better change your top 5.
And also, like,
Oh, it's not on
honestly,
there.
I'm a fan of Hellraiser, but man, the first one's good, and then like after it's
The ones in the 90s are Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth, and Bloodlines. Both of them just...
Wasn't
Woof.
3 the one
Bloodlines
that
is
didn't have
big
a
wolf.
director? Like they halfway through the film, it didn't get finished, and then they
Something
tried
like
to
that.
edit it to make a film.
My favorite thing about part 3 is it's got the Cenobite that's got the CDs.
Yes.
And it kills people
I
with
love the
CDs,
CDs.
compact discs.
Yes.
because that's what's
Terrifying.
up. In
So
the
the Scream
90s.
franchise is a big deal. Do you like the Scream franchise?
Love the Scream franchise.
Obviously, it doesn't go as deep into the metaverse as New Nightmare does, but it's still there. It's aware of itself.
Yeah, it's
playing
very
on the
aware. The
rules.
teenagers all know the rules.
Yeah,
They've
they
all
explain
seen the
them.
horror films. They know what happens if you go alone. They know what happens if you have sex. Like all the cliche things that happened in the previous.
You were talking about how in the 90s they tried to do horror movies that were very teen-oriented, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend. Those were all, even H2O, those were all kind of aping on Scream.
Scream. It was Scream's success that
And
they
that's
wanted
Kevin
to cash
Williamson.
in on. Yeah, the Dawson's Creek guy.
Yeah.
He wrote, not only did he do the Scream films, but he also wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer films.
Yeah, I love Kevin Williamson as a writer. I love the way he writes. It's very much like the way Kevin Smith wrote for Clerks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very dumb, like not so advanced people talking as if they're professors.
I think it, but that
Everybody
being,
in a Kevin Williamson film has a way higher vocabulary than they should.
That being said, he did the I Know What You Did Last Summer films, and they didn't capture that same thing that because he didn't team up with Wes. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Nobody else is Wes Craven.
No, Ryan Philippe was in those movies.
Yes.
Or the first one.
And he is dreamy.
He is.
I'll give you that. So anyway,
and Timothy Olyphant, dreamy Timothy Olyphant's in Scream too. You guys like Scream movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're good stuff, right?
I need to watch 4. I feel like I've seen it, but I've only seen like bits and pieces.
It is great.
Why do you think Wes Craven had success in the 90s when other directors that were popular in the 70s and 80s didn't?
Yeah, it started to flounder. We had some new up-and-coming directors that were great, but a lot of the directors who returned didn't have the same success. Why do you think Wes Craven just like...
I mean, I think it's what you said earlier. He was kind of more tuned into like the pulse of like society at the time, what we wanted in the horror film, and I think the other directors at the time just... I don't know. I guess they just couldn't hit their mark. I don't know. It might have helped that he was kind of like taking a approach that was more, I guess, relatable to younger audiences.
A little bit more self-aware as well.
That too, like self-aware, and like it was more people could access the work, because I mean, it sucks that they had to tone down some of the violence, but it also meant like more teenagers could come in to see these other teenagers get murdered on film.
And what's great, it's the suspense and it's the dialogue, the pacing, the atmosphere that makes us love horror films, not so much the gore, the violence, the sex, all that stuff, right?
Exactly. Like everything took a more psychological approach, and he really, really got into that.
Speaking of getting into taking a more psychological approach, well, Drew's not here, so what about you, Justin? What do you think?
He ask the
All right.
question again. I was listening to you guys for so long. Why was he so successful? Yeah,
compared to others.
Yeah, because it there was. I mean, like with which year was Scream? 94?
96?
96. And then
94 was
97,
New Nightmare.
97 is the second
Okay.
Scream. So they were fucking gearing up for the second one like
They
that.
wanted that money like
Yeah.
bad.
So like he started with the New Nightmare and
Well, 1990, 1990 he did People Under the Stairs, if you want to start the 90s.
But he's talking about the meta.
changing the form.
So
Yeah, making it
aware
meta
of-
and
Yeah,
goofier
I would say New Nightmare starts with his more being, that film was cognizant and meta, and then Scream was even more so.
Yeah, not counting People Under the Stairs and New Nightmare with the Scream movies. I think they were so popular because he basically took instead of taking a classic horror film and retooling it to be a new horror film, he took like the old 70s and 80s like college kid, like Animal House and stuff like that.
You know, American Pie was like a few years away. Yeah, like going back to that teen comedy idea of it a little bit. Yeah.
So he took one of those movies and made it into a horror movie.
And great casting, you know, with people like, what's the dude that played Liev Schreiber?
Yeah,
right?
Liev Schreiber.
Jamie Kennedy.
David Arquette.
What's the dreamy dude that's like Johnny Depp light? What's his name?
He was David Arquette?
Skeet Ulrich.
Skeet Ulrich. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Matt Lillard.
Yeah,
you know?
Matt Lillard.
Matt Lillard. Yeah, Shaggy.
Shaggy.
Yeah,
Oh,
Shaggy.
man.
I love the Scream movies. What about their legacy? John, I know I haven't seen the MTV show. I've heard good things about it. Now, Wes Craven had nothing to do with that. Kevin Williamson did, though, right?
Yeah, and I've never visited it because I heard it was decent, but because I'm a Wes Craven fan, I'm like, no Wes Craven, no dice.
Yeah,
Sorry.
but you know how important Kevin Williamson is to those movies,
Yeah,
right?
I know, but he's not. They're not. I don't care.
And even
It's
though
not Wes Craven.
even though it's not 90s, 3 sucks.
3 is okay. It's got good, decent parts, but it felt like it was way too tongue in cheek,
Yeah,
way too self aware,
yeah.
way too.
It does have
way
Jay and
too,
Silent Bob in
Yeah,
it.
way
Like all the
too
good things we've
comedic.
been saying about him, it just did too much of it.
Yeah,
But 4 really got back to that for me.
4 did, and that was the 2000s, but it is a phenomenal film.
I
It's a
totally
great
forgot
cast.
Jay and Silent Bob are in the third one. Why are they in that movie?
Because
Why
Wes
wouldn't
Craven's
they
in
be?
it. Why
I don't
not?
understand.
Because Miramax was making Scream and Jay
Yeah.
and Silent Bob.
Yeah, that's true. That was
Yes,
Miramax.
it makes sense.
You know, another thing that really happened during this time was like the move from practical effects to CG.
What does CG stand for? Cock graphics.
Yes.
The detailed
Wes
penis.
Craven was all in on that.
The porn.
It was all that porn experience.
The computer graphics. So there's the 90s and Jurassic Park especially. We start seeing this go to from practical to more CG, and the 90s are guilty of this. Not always for the better. Case in point, they use CG to try to fix H2O's mask. By the way, not for the better. They tried, and then you've got films like American Werewolf in Paris, which most people will agree is a
Gross.
mediocre film.
I actually like it, though, because of the Bush song.
Dude, that's a great song.
The remix of
It's a
Mouth.
great soundtrack.
But
It's
that
the whole
movie
soundtrack
is like
great.
absolute trash.
Those werewolves, that are amazing looking, but they don't look like they're in the film. It looks like they superimposed.
The werewolves look really fucking weird.
Yeah, I think they look really cool, but they don't look like they belong to that film.
They don't have tails.
They belong to a much better film. And so there's this
An American Werewolf in Glasgow. Which one? I want to know the in-between film between London and Paris. Like, let's make that film.
Let's do it. Let's get up behind it.
Let's get Del Toro.
American Werewolf in Portugal.
American Werewolf in Huntsville, Alabama.
That's not between those two
Wait,
places.
but I'm in America, and hold on, that doesn't work.
American Werewolf in America. We'll make it like a French werewolf.
The CG sticks out in that film.
It does. And so, unfortunately, you've got a lot of great films marred by bad CG. Some films with great CG because they used a half practical and half CG for the damn evil ship one, the spaceship. What's that called?
Event Horizon.
Thank you. I forgot the name of it,
And
but it works well.
It works.
That one visually is a treat.
Del Toro's likes to mix the two.
And it mixed well. But there are some films where they definitely push the CG envelope, and either the budget didn't allow it or the CG didn't allow it.
To me, one of those is the remake of The Haunting.
Bad CG.
It's bad CG, and that's all they relied on for that movie. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, when they cut off Owen Wilson's head, Owen, wow.
Wow, my head's missing.
When they cut off his head, that really worked for me. But aside from that, it's all just like CG, angel cherubim statues turning their heads and making faces. Like, it looks
There's
so
a lot
cheesy.
of bad CG.
It's like I'm playing Doom on my PC computer from 1993.
Why were you British when you said computer? I don't understand.
PC computer. I was South African. Whatever.
I think they have a British accent. Anyway, because they were colonized by the
It was a Diane
anyway.
word thing. Whatever. He's got a PC computer.
Jeremy.
Yeah. What's up?
Do you think it was abrupt? You agree there's some bad CG, and that these films would have benefited from some more practical effects.
Ooh,
New Nightmare has some great practical effects.
I'm gonna say, and it's bad. I love New Nightmare, but so at the very beginning when he's working on that glove, and that glove starts moving around on its own, it's a little iffy because that's some CG, and you can clearly tell that glove isn't meant to be there, and the rest of it's real, and that's a CG object.
But I'll tell you what. Look at the Addams Family movie, and the thing.
He looks a lot better somehow, right?
Because that's practical.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess that's true. They use like robotics, right? A little bit of
No, it was
They
a
used
dude's
that
hand.
and a
They
dude's
cut off
hand, but they would
they cut off a real dude's hand.
They did green screen shit. Yeah, they cut off a real dude's hand and made it walk around.
Yeah.
Wow.
Excuse me, guys. Let's not make fun of it. That was an actual guy. He had a disease where he didn't have a body.
He was just
had nothing left. There's nothing left. Also, again, in New Nightmare, the very end of it, when they stab him inside the furnace and his face expands across the screen, it's weird. It's a really weird CG
Well, that
scene.
part actually is not CG. It's practical effects, but it looks really weird. That is practical, but you're right.
What
His
about
giant face?
Yeah, the fire after also is the explosion.
That's
that's
CG.
weird.
That's really weird.
It's
CG.
like you were saying, it's like they got to the point where they're trying to do CG effects, but they didn't quite know how they wanted to implement it into films.
New Nightmare had a big budget, but what it didn't have is that I don't think CG had caught up at the time for certain things.
Yeah, because it's earlier in the 90s.
Yeah,
like
and-
94, 93.
And fire was not something that CG had perfected at the time.
Oh, no. They used
Dinosaurs, yes. Fire, no.
Yeah, there's clearly some...
I felt like Frankenstein.
They barely had fire in Lord of the Rings right.
Yeah.
Right? It's somebody clearly animated this.
Yeah.
It holds up better than the weird black screen superimposed dancing Freddy skeleton from
Was that Freddy's Dead?
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But now
Yeah.
you're playing with power.
what do you think about the CG and the rise of CG?
They
and
do use some really
CG.
good Nick Arcade CG in Freddy's Dead when Breckenmeyer goes into the video game. It
Oh,
looks
my
just
God.
like Nick Arcade, doesn't it?
That
I remember
scene
that
is
Nick
so
Arcade.
cheesy. It's so cheesy. And then he hits his head on the ceiling a bunch. And that movie.
I hate
Guys.
that movie because it's like, I mean, I like the movie, to be honest with you, but I hate that bit because it's like, oh, this guy's a stoner. And
Oh,
he
like-
plays video games, so of course he's not paying attention.
He's going to die first, you dummies. Don't smoke weed and play games.
He's making stoners and video gamers look bad. What do you think about that, Jeremy?
I think the end of it's really cool because they go through all the death montage for all the movies.
Yeah, they do.
That's like the best part of the film, and the rest of it's okay.
Well,
I guess.
and Roseanne's in the movie. She's crazy. That's
There's a
fun.
lot of random famous actors in that.
Yeah, it's a film. So what do you think about the CG in the rise of CG. You're an actor.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of CG in the stuff you're in? I heard they had to CG your testicles on in a recent movie.
Was that?
the Transformers movie?
Are you in the new Terminator?
No. I'm gonna actually break with you guys a little bit on this subject. I like going back and watching the 90s CG because it's not overdone like for the time.
Everything now is
overdone.
CG.
Yeah,
everything's CG.
It's cheaper.
And seeing this, going back and watching 90s movies with the CG that they used is almost as enjoyable as watching old claymation stuff.
But isn't it some of it though throw you off though if you're really into a movie and it's like, oh, that's clearly a CG monkey, and it sort of like takes you out of that zone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, obviously it's gonna mess with you if some weird shit like that happens. But I mean, the worst CG in the 90s is more enjoyable for me to watch than some of the new stuff.
You like the dating of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's like the claymation
it's a snapshot.
and stuff. Yeah.
Goldsmith will date anything.
And like there's some pretty cool stuff in like Lord of Illusions, like where he's passing like it looks bad. It's clearly fake because people can't do that.
Okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
What about you, Robbie? What CG? What stands out, or what do you think's bad, or do you think that the rise of the '90s CG was for the worst? Because I'm a big fan of practical effects. Look at some of the bad CG in the '90s.
Yeah.
Then go back to '82 and watch The Thing, which is all practical.
Yeah, I
and
get
that
it.
shit's amazing.
Well, watch some of the stuff from the early '90s that wasn't. And I get it. Like, look at the difference between The Haunting and I don't know, People Under the Stairs. Like, maybe they're not trying to like. I feel like once they started doing CG, they were like, well, I think before they were ready, they started going too far. They were like, well, we can just do this with CG. And then somebody, I'm sure, was like, no, we can't. But some producer or director was like, yeah, you can. Just, put your head down and power through it. You'll get to it.
What do you mean people have to have shadows? What the fuck?
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about is that, like, at the time, Spawn looked awesome. Now it doesn't.
No.
Not at all.
It's a little troublesome.
But you have to have those steps to get where we're going. And
I remember it looking really shitty when it came out.
I thought Spawn looked amazing when I
Really?
first saw it. Yeah.
Dude, when he turns his cape into like armor around himself and stuff, that's sick back in the day. But now it's like, woof.
Yeah, back then I didn't see that his cape was moving through like statues and people. You know what I'm
major
saying?
clipping issues then.
Yeah, I didn't see that back then. But I think it was necessary, and I'm glad it happened. I guess in the late '90s. But like, yeah, look at Alien 3 versus Alien Resurrection. The aliens that are practical look way better than the ones that are CG. But things have changed. At the same time, though, Jurassic Park came out, 93?
Yeah.
It looks amazing still today.
Yeah.
Well, most of a lot of stuff in it was practical, too.
It's true.
It was half practical, half CG.
I think what happened is too many filmmakers started using it as a crutch. I do think that continues into today.
Oh, most
Did you know
certainly.
that Jeff Goldblum was entirely CG through the whole film?
Only in Lost World.
Oh, never mind. I had my facts wrong.
You can't CG that six-pack he had in the first movie.
So, talk about a six-pack. I'm going to take a break and get another beer. When we come back, we're going to talk about our top 5. And I think Robbie reached out to the old social media, asked them their favorite horror films from the 90s. We'll be right back on Pop Culture Philosophers. Welcome back to Pop Culture Philosophers, talking about 90s horror. And I think Robbie reached out to the old social media, asked them their favorite 90s horror film. We're about to do our top 5 here in just a second, but I'm curious to hear what everybody else thinks. The PCP Army, the general public, see what their favorite 90s horror film is.
It's always interesting, the social media, John.
We always get some crazy, some expected stuff, and then some like off-the-wall stuff.
Yeah, and I love hearing from the friends, fans, followers, family, all that jazz, right?
Dogs, cats, listen to the show.
So from the live stream this last Sunday, that's right, every Sunday night, pretty much, 7 p.m. U.S. Central Time, I do a live stream on our YouTube channel, Pop Culture Philosophers. Check that out. St. Gia said It is his favorite 90s horror movie, and it's a miniseries on TV, but it's good. It works. It counts. And he also said Blair Witch Project.
Good call.
Good call. Stephanie Lynch said Army of Darkness and The Craft.
We haven't brought up Army of Darkness or The Craft.
Well, I think Army of Darkness is probably going to get brought up a lot
Yeah.
in top 5.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just my idea. Eddie G said Candyman. Comics Club said The Sixth Sense and Interview with a Vampire. Brett Hess, a master artist, said Silence of the Lambs. Hamburger Basket, one of my favorite YouTube handles, says Demon Knight, Ravenous, and Mouth of Madness. Mouth of Madness, a great one.
Yeah.
So good.
John Carpenter, actually.
I watched that last night for the first time. It's
Reggie
amazing.
Simmons, our good homie Reggie Simmons, said Ringu. Ooh.
Oh, yeah. We said that. 1998.
Good call. Good call.
Keith on the live stream said Jacob's Ladder and The Good Son. The Good Son!
I forgot that was a thing.
I forgot about the good. I wouldn't make my top 5
That was
regardless.
Macaulay Culkin, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
and
Yes.
it's disturbing.
This is a weird movie.
Yeah, it's dark.
Thank you, guys.
It's a great film.
Yeah,
Thanks for
bringing that
bringing
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to my Twitter page real quick, and we got some comic book creators joining in the conversation here. First of all, we have Brad F, who says Candyman. Leslie, our fan from the Philippines, I believe, says The Guardian. Creepy babysitter who just floated in the forest. It's a climatic scene. I have no idea what he's talking about. This sounds great.
The Guardian's a film?
Yeah, The Guardian.
Okay. I don't know this film. That's my
He
fault.
sent me a screenshot of the film
Ooh.
from 1990.
Show that over
apparently.
here. I want to see.
I gotta check it out.
It's really just a rotten, yeah, but there it is. That's crazy. I've never seen that. Absolutely. That's super cool. Also, Chad Rebman, writer of Relics of Youth at Vault Comics, said 7. Directed by David Fincher, that movie scared the living crap out of me so bad that I slept with the light on for like a week. Hell yeah. And he's currently co-writing, of course. Relics of Youth by Vault Comics. Darcy Van Polgeest, writer of Little Bird, literally my favorite comic book of this year, said Jacob's Ladder.
Talk about psychological.
I need to revisit that. I haven't seen that since like middle school.
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever seen it, and if I have, it was when I was
It's
too young.
it's a great film. It's Tim Robbins, right?
Yeah.
Love Tim Robbins.
Yeah, some great responses right there. Let's move over to the PCP Army. I'm really excited. We got some.
We got some that I expected the same old. I expected the same top 5 to be similar.
Yeah.
To what they were going to say, but there's definitely some ones that stood out and some different ones. So I appreciate you guys for chiming in.
From the PCP Army, our official Pop Culture Philosophers Facebook group, we got Jeff Shirley saying Blair Witch Project for sure, especially seeing it on the big screen and not actually seeing.
Oh, see?
Witch. Yeah. James Donahoe, good friend of the show.
Yep.
Said In the Mouth of Madness. Great. That's a great movie.
Another In the Mouth of Madness.
It's not on my top 5, but it really is good. I need to revisit that soon. Finley gave us a few for different situations, I guess, right? He's like, if I want to laugh, if I want to be scared, whatever. Basically, Finley said, people under the scared.
Under the Scares.
People under the stairs.
That's my next horror film I'm making.
The Frighteners, Scream, House on Haunted Hill, and Event Horizon.
Wow, he's got some great fucking taste.
And The Faculty.
Yeah, The Faculty is actually...
Starring
part of
Usher
that
Raymond.
and it's part of that teen...
Paul Edwards 5 hours ago said Evil Dead. To which I said, you mean Army of Darkness? No response. No
It's
response.
the 90s. Okay.
Then Chris Polk said Army of Darkness. Will Priest, friend of the show, said Scream. Grayson says Scream. Clem says, depends if you count Silence of the Lambs.
Hell yeah, we do.
Adam Bryson said, how much time do you have? I said, limit it to a top 3. He said, People Under the Stairs, Tremors, Demon Knight, Idle Hands, Frighteners, From Dusk Till Dawn, The Blair Witch Project, Jacob's Ladder, Audition, Dead Alive, Misery, New Nightmare. Yeah.
Respect for Idle Hands. That's the ultimate stoner horror comedy thing. I love it.
Good old Brian A. said From Dusk Till Dawn and Lair of the White Worm for an obscurish one. Jason, our good friend at Comics Misexplained, said probably Event Horizon. That's a good movie. Mm-hmm. Garen said Poltergeist. I had to remind him that's not
The third one is, but it's like trash.
Maybe that's what he's talking about. I don't know. Good old Dylan from the Deep said Night of the Living Dead, the Tom Savini version, The Frighteners, and the Blair Witch Project, which he said unpopular opinion. I know. I doubt that, homie. We're right there with you. Timothy Gorman, good friend of the show, said Della Moore, a.k.a. Cemetery Man. Randy Riley said Screamers, From Dusk Till Dawn, The Faculty, Cube. I hate Cube. It, Event Horizon, The People Under the Stairs, Night Breed, Flatliners, and then good old House, who I mentioned, said Misery. Thank you all.
Yeah.
That was a lot of social media. Thank you all. Everybody on Twitter,
I was surprised with the
Facebook.
variety. I expected the same.
Dude,
like,
we got
the
some
same
comic book
ones.
writers respond.
I am also surprised the amount of people that put Blair Witch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Their favorite.
Yeah. I wonder what's in our favorites. I think Army of Darkness is going to be talked about a lot, personally.
It's funny that it hasn't been brought up because I'm sure you're right.
Because of reasons.
Yeah.
You better wait.
Maybe we've been saving it.
I was really interested.
All this
to
talk
hear
of
your
Wes
top
Craven
five.
was a mislead.
I'll say also Misery is one I feel like I thought more people would bring up throughout because, I mean,
It's one of the best
King.
Stephen King
Yeah,
ones.
it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great book. It's a great film.
Yeah,
it's a great
Alicia's-
adaptation.
Alicia's reading that right now, and she says, like, it's just crazy.
Anytime I see the ankle breaking scene, it just hurts my ankles in real life.
I love the Family Guy version
Yes.
of that.
Damn it.
I'll be in a wheelchair. No, you won't. She
just kills.
It just kills. So that was your favorite. Some of you gave us your favorite. Some of us gave you your top 20. We're going to get to our top 5, sort of the meat and potatoes of the show, or the dessert, or whatever. Robbie and I discuss this every time, argue over it.
It is the meat and potatoes.
So I'm going to actually start with Jeremie. If you can, start with your number 5, and give us your top 5 if you can. If you can narrow it down to 5.
It's really hard.
You always
because
say that. We
it's-
always tell people you have to narrow it down
I
to
hate
5.
that. It's so
and then
hard
you go,
because
if you can.
it's hard because like sometimes you want to slip a 6th in there, you know.
Yeah.
I'm
But,
down for an honorable mention. John's not.
Yeah, I mean, my honorable mention would go to definitely Event Horizon. I didn't make it on the list because it would go into 6, and it would go in the 6th slot if I could. But I love that movie, but not enough to make the 5. Number 5 is going to be The Frighteners.
The Frighteners. Peter Jackson, Michael J. Fox,
Yeah,
Daniel Day-Lewis was not in the film.
No. No, look, Arlie Army's in it though. Arlie Army, he's rest in peace. He's in it. He's one of the like.
Actually has a great cast. And
Yeah.
dude, Peter Jackson. It's one I really think it's an underrated film. I really
It's
do.
weird too because I thought
It's a good
watching
movie.
it as a kid and even as an adult, I'm surprised this did not do better than it did because it seems it's scary, yes, but it does seem like it's designed to like maybe start possibly a franchise, but nothing else came out of it. It was just the one movie, and maybe it's due to Peter Jackson saying, "Hey, I want that Lord of the Rings money." I don't know.
Yeah, if you think of the timing,
'Cause it came out
Lord
like-
of the Rings was right.
It was right after, yeah. I don't know if maybe that had something to do with it because it felt like at the end of it they were setting it up for a franchise, but then
It just always felt more cult. to me.
I don't know what happened, but it's a great movie. Number 4 is going to be The New Nightmare, Wes Craven.
Oh, nice.
Because I am always going to be a Freddy fan and Nightmare on Elm Street and everything. He's great. So the fact that he was able to transition that series into the 90s after a hiccup, one might say, maybe a hiccup.
Talk about Freddy's Dead.
I like
Yeah,
Freddy's Dead.
I mean, I don't hate Freddy's Dead.
It's got
It's-
positive things.
It is so cheesy.
Yeah.
It's fun to watch.
That
and
3D bit is
when,
awesome.
when they put on the damn 3D glasses for no reason other than to promote a 3D film. But it's a decent movie. But A New Nightmare is a better film.
Yeah, bringing Wes back to the franchise and
Exactly.
doing what Wes does best.
To me, it's a perfect trilogy. The Wes Craven ones. That's 1, 3, and
Yeah,
New Nightmare.
Dream Warriors. I've said that to everybody. That's like if you want the perfect trilogy.
I could probably give a whole like dissertation on Dream Warriors and how awesome it is.
We
but
should
we
do
won't.
an 80s horror redux one day.
Oh my god. Well, that's going to definitely be in there. Number 3? Yes. It's going to
Yes.
be From Dusk Till Dawn.
Wow.
Good call.
Really, that made your top 5.
Yes. Easy. I love that movie.
It's really good.
You don't
I
even
only like the
understand.
first half of that movie.
When they're in there playing like instruments and all the people like it's body parts and stuff, you look away and it's like instruments, and you look back later and they're playing like instruments made of like entrails and like body parts. Amazing.
Quentin Tarantino.
Quentin
And
Tarantino.
Tom
Yeah.
Savini
Yeah,
is
is
the
in it.
crotch
Yeah.
gun guy.
Yep.
Sir George Clooney.
Why is
I'm
everyone
knighting
a
everybody. I'm
sir?
knighting everybody now.
Robert
Is
Rodriguez.
he actually a sir? I don't think so.
He's not.
But
He is
Robert,
not.
But I am.
Robert Rodriguez.
You can tell though the directing style changes significantly after they get to that.
I argue with Mike about this all the time. Mike, the voice, Matthews. Tarantino did the first half of that film. It's a crime film.
That's like the first 25%.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then it goes crazy, and that's Robert.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I don't. Once they go to where, what was it, like a bordello or something they're at?
Yeah.
I lose it. I love the first bit of that movie,
It's basically like
but I hate the rest.
it's almost like. Have you ever seen Death Proof and Planet
Yeah.
Terror?
Yeah.
It's very like that.
I
It's
like
almost as
Planet
like
Terror.
they had multiple directors.
I mean, it's the same two people.
Yes.
So,
But in that case, I like the Robert Rodriguez part better. I like Planet Terror way better than Death Proof.
Really?
I think Death Proof is the worst thing Tarantino did outside of Four Rooms.
I've never seen Four Rooms.
I hate that movie.
Well, then I don't know.
They're
Now I'm
both
like,
involved in that one too.
now I'm scared to watch it. I mean, maybe I'll watch it
You
just
have
because
to watch
you
it.
should watch
You're not
You have
missing. I don't feel you're missing anything by skipping it.
I'll probably get to it at some point. I have a backlog of films to watch. Anyway,
Okay, you're number 2.
number 2 is going to be Army of Darkness.
Army of motherfucking
Yes,
Darkness.
Bruce Campbell,
Yeah.
go.
Sam Raimi.
I'm pretty much on board with most Sam Raimi things, and well, maybe
Sir
not
Sam Raimi.
Maybe not Spider-Man 3. That's a little rough.
I like Spider-Man 3. That's a different story.
Spider-Man
Yeah.
3 has good things about it, but again, that was like producers' interference and stuff.
It's not
right?
his fault that it ended up terrible. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think he wanted to do the shitty Venom parts and all that.
I'm gonna tell
anyway,
you this: the CG in Spider-Man 3 looks better than the CG in a '90s horror film.
Well, yeah, yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But I love Army of Darkness because it's an adventure film, but it's also like it's a dark fantasy adventure. Like
Yeah.
it's horror and all, you know. But
It does take itself less seriously than the previous Evil
Exactly.
Dead films, but for the better. What?
I mean, I think the first one took itself too seriously, but the second one, like
It's
Evil
more
Dead 2
tongue-in-cheek.
it gets
Yeah.
a little bit
They're
more.
all absurd.
They are,
Yeah.
but Army of Darkness is more so absurd. I mean, the whole Claude
It
Veronic
doesn't feel like they even
part.
tried to be scary.
I just rewatched Darkman for an upcoming movie review
Oh
we're
my
doing.
God,
that was the
Darkman.
PCP Army
How does
voted
he talk
for
with no
Darkman.
lips? Anyway,
Dude, but anyway, that movie is so Sam Raimi, but it's so good.
I like
know?
Arm.
And
Yeah,
I like
dude,
Darkman.
Liam fucking Neeson.
I like
man.
Darkman. That's a good movie. I've
Yeah,
seen it
it
a few
is. Yeah,
times.
it's great.
And my number 1's Tremors.
Holy
Oh,
shit!
nice.
Really?
I told everybody on the live stream. Tremors will be
Tremors.
mentioned.
Tremors.
Tremors is my number 1.
The movie.
Hell yes. It's amazing.
with Sir Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon. Hell yeah.
Kevin Sir Bacon. You mean.
I have Tremors defined a lot of my childhood at that time, and I don't know why as a kid I watched it so much, but I love that movie, and I still do. I go back and watch it like pretty regularly, even. I mean, it's not like the best acting performance from even the good actors, but it is a very unique film, and it started kind of like the horror, like the monster movie, like American monster movie trend at the time. I think.
Everybody else was doing psychological thriller.
We're just like straight up monsters, baby. We don't care about none of that. These are some things from another
yeah.
It
planet.
was a
Or
throwback, man.
It's a really cool
Yeah.
concept, and it's got a great cast.
It's like we don't care about trying to keep this realistic. Just there's monsters under the ground, and if you move, they'll eat you. And that's the story.
I like
That yeah, that was the prequel to Beetlejuice with the big.
The sandworm.
That's a great top
That
five.
would be Dune with the Shai Hulud.
That's a phenomenal top 5, a very interesting top 5. I didn't think any fucking person would ever put Tremors as their number 1.
Dude.
But I did.
Tremors.
Sir Jeremie Goldsmith.
Yeah.
I said you were knighted during break. Your top 5, if you can narrow down a top 5. I know you're gonna have. If I swear to God, if you have an honorable mention, I will punch you
No,
right in the penis.
I don't. I'm not doing an honorable mention, but I'm going to say that Tremors was in my top 15 until I had to trim it down, so I cut
15.
out monster movies.
You had to trim it down.
Yeah. Yes.
Trimmers
I had to
it down.
Yeah, exactly.
all
I had
of
to
this
cut
is,
out all my monster
all of this
movies.
is being cut
so
out of the episode.
there
So
went
that's fine.
There went Tremors and Arachnophobia. Spoilers. My number 5, though, Blair Witch Project.
Oh.
How does that keep making people's top 5s?
Because it was a game changer, man.
I'll give you that.
It was a game changer. And it's really scary to watch the first time.
Especially if you were, imagine if you were one of those people that really thought it was legit. Because there were people that thought this was real. Imagine how terrifying that would
Yeah,
be.
I was 10 years old when it came out.
Holy shit.
Yeah, fuck
You were just a wee baby.
Yeah, and we didn't have the internet at the time, or not ready
For the
access
people
to
listening, and I don't know how many people know Goldsmith, the actor. He is 12 years old now. He saw it 2 years ago.
it. It is now
on
2001.
Blu-ray. You're
God.
clocking. Your watch is on.
Uh,
Number 4.
yes, number 4 is the House on Haunted Hill remake.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, it's on my top 5. I fucking love that movie.
That surprises
I have always,
the fuck out of me.
I
I
have.
I didn't know
always
it was going to
loved
make anybody's list.
You hate it?
I'm not trying to be that strong, even though I
Yeah.
did tell Jeremy that I hated. What was that movie you mentioned?
That's Tremors? You hate Tremors?
Oh no, Dust Till Dawn.
Oh, from Dust Till
I,
Dawn.
well,
Yeah,
I hate
yeah.
the second.
Is this
part
the
of
one
it.
with Jeffrey Rush? Am I
Yeah.
confusing the Haunted?
Yeah.
He looks almost exactly.
He does a very good Vincent
like
Price.
Vincent Price.
Yeah.
But he's no Vincent Price.
It's got what?
Well,
Ali
obviously
Larder
not.
in it and Tay Diggs, right?
Combs
Yeah.
is in that movie.
Jeffrey. Jeffrey Combs? Is
Yes.
It? Oh yeah, he plays one of the doctors.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
It has a great
And,
cast.
and
I'll give you
Chris
that.
Kattan plays the
Yes, he does. Yeah.
the sidekick.
One
guy,
cool
whatever.
thing, I'll say one cool thing about that movie is that like a woman and a black man survived to the end of it.
Yeah,
It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what?
That was like a whole
Yeah.
90s, early 2000s thing, man.
Yeah.
LL Cool J started that shit.
Yeah,
That's true with
exactly.
Deep Blue.
and it's
See?
No, with H2O.
like
What?
Halloween H2O. LL makes it.
and
Man.
And then
one
it
of the,
started a movement. But Samuel L. Jackson could not be a part of that.
No, he got ate up real quick in that shit.
But this is legit like one of the movies I think of when I think horror film because it's like I mean I love the old one too.
Now, I watched that movie when I was like right after high school, and I remember the hype around it. So like you were young.
Yeah,
And so I can imagine like that's a big deal
yeah, it was
at that age.
it
yeah,
was
especially.
awesome.
Yeah.
And
Also, the Marilyn Manson cover of Sweet Dreams?
It's got a great soundtrack.
yeah, the soundtrack's great, but it's the when I think of horror, this is like one of my favorite concepts of it is the original and
Yeah, the
And the new
Vincent
one.
Price one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
like if you can survive the night in this house, then you get $1 million, however
Yeah.
much it was.
Because we would do that in a heartbeat.
I would do
Yeah.
that. I have loans to pay off. I don't care. If I die,
Yeah.
then I don't have to pay off the loans, I guess.
And you do.
It's a win-win either way.
I love that movie.
What is your number 3?
My number 3 is Clive
Okay.
Barker's Lord of Illusions.
Oh, Lord of Illusion.
That's a
Yeah.
good film.
I really, really love it. It's a detective noir with horror mixed in. I guess detective noir mixed into horror, but we were talking about the CG earlier, and like I forget the actor's name. He's in Super Troopers as the other, whatever. It's like passing around fire, huh? Brian Cox? No. He was the other. Whatever. It's not important. It's a really, really awesome movie. I love detective noirs, and it's like a mix of a lot of my favorite things in one movie. And Scott Bakula plays the main character.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it.
That's why he likes it, because it's
Yeah.
Scott Bakula. That's
Well, I
why.
love Scott Bakula
Yep,
too.
that's
He's got a
Yeah.
hard on for Scott Bakula.
He just
Yeah.
thinks it's a special episode of Quantum Leap.
Is it not?
See, that's the reality he's living
No,
in.
it's a good
But
movie.
it's a great movie.
We did a whole Clive Barker thing for a horror fest, like, God, probably like 8 years ago or something. And yeah, we watched it, and it was fun. It held up.
Yeah, I still love it.
So what's your number 2? Your deuce.
My number 2,
Drop a deuce on us.
Event Horizon.
Oh, the Event Horizon. She's come back.
Yes, it's Sam Neill was one of my favorite actors when I was a kid. He
It's
hasn't
because
really
you're a
done-
Jurassic Park
Jurassic
fan.
Park,
Yeah.
you know.
mainly, but he hasn't really
You
done
can't-
much.
Not because of the Omen.
She won't let you.
Which Omen movie he's in? He's in one of the Omen movies.
He's in Omen 3, Damien.
Oh yeah.
He plays Damien growing up, becoming part of the U.S.
That's a
government.
90s
Yeah.
movie.
He's an
That is
ambassador.
a 90s
That's a
movie.
nice
I
horror
think
movie.
that's 80s. I think Awakening
Is
is
it?
the only Omen movie that's in the
okay.
90s.
Moving on. Anyway,
Lawrence Fishburne.
dude,
like,
Event Horizon
it's
is
a really
amazing.
awesome
Event Horizon is one of
concept.
those films that I was not really aware of. Like I saw the poster, and I was working at a theater at the time, and I was like, "Oh, this looks cool. I'll go check it out." Boredom, and just blew my fucking mind.
You know,
Yeah.
people still quote that as or mention that movie as being one of the rare movies that scares them today.
It's creepy
Yeah,
as shit.
It's nightmarish.
Yeah, because it's like that Hellraiser thing where they like find it's like
It's
this is-
Hellraiser in space.
This is
Yeah,
exactly
Yeah,
The limit
better
configuration
than
is a whole
Hellraiser in
spaceship.
Yeah.
space was.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I forget
Yeah.
that's the thing.
Is it
Oh.
Clive Barker? No,
No,
no, it's Del
No.
Toro.
What, Event
No.
Horizon?
Wait, who the hell did Event Horizon?
It's-
Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill.
I'm just
Yeah,
trying to
they
remember
just-
if it's anybody
They
famous.
just made that movie together.
Because it does feel Clive.
Is it just one guy that
Barker-ish.
just made this movie? One
Yeah.
person that just made this movie?
His name
and
was
that's it?
Steve Horizon.
Paul W.S. Anderson.
Oh,
Oh.
really?
Oh, we know him.
Yeah, I didn't know that's who did
Yeah.
that. I love that movie, though. It's a good
Oh,
one.
wow. Yeah, that's a great top
Wow.
4.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we get to your number 1. We got kind of sidetracked by Event Horizon.
This is a long podcast, but it's horror
Yeah.
related, so
Event Horizon.
who cares?
People can't tell, but we're doing the whole podcast on that Event Horizon ship.
Oh, my
Yes.
God. I'm
it's,
out.
It's super scary, by the way.
Yeah.
We've died
This hell-
9 times.
We
Yeah.
started with more people on the show, and
There's
there's
a portal to a hell dimension right to our fucking left, and it's just really creepy.
One of those is a dimension to beer. The other one takes you to hell. So it's a slippery slope. I'm like, I need another beer. Ooh, which portal do I take? Unfortunately, it's only Bud Light Lime, which I like, and people bash, but I like it. What's your number 1?
My number 1.
This is your favorite. You can't ever change this.
Yeah, and I almost took it off the list because I was trying to trim everything down, but I couldn't leave it off.
Oh, please let it be a Wes Craven
Trim
film.
everything down.
It's Army of Darkness.
I knew it.
Yes.
Not a Wes Craven film.
That's fine.
I tried to trick myself into taking it off the list and making it a Bruce Campbell film and not a horror film, but
It's almost not a horror film because it's more comedic, but it's such a fantastic
It's
film.
so close to just being a straight up dark fantasy film, but
It's a horror film.
But
It's a
it's
horror
It
film.
is phenomenal.
yeah. Bruce Campbell is one of my favorite actors
I love Bruce
of all
Campbell.
time. I've modeled a
Have
good
you
bit
watched
of
the
a persona
entire
after
Evil
him.
Dead show? Did you watch Bruce versus the
I
Army
don't
of Darkness?
think I watched the last half of the
I need to
last
go
season.
watch it
I need to
myself.
finish it.
Yeah, I didn't
But I
finish
really
the last
liked
season
it.
where he's got the daughter.
Yeah.
I didn't finish that. Everything else I finished. I need to finish the last season. But I
You
love
know,
the show.
They just announced the other day that Bruce Campbell is producing a new Evil Dead movie.
Are you fucking serious?
What?
I don't think that Sam Raimi's
I
going
heard
to
that.
direct it.
I heard that. But I
Hopefully
think he's
Sam Raimi's
involved.
somehow involved.
I think he's involved as in like an executive or something.
His
Yeah.
fingerprints are all over the show, and it shows, and that's why the show is good.
But
Because the show actually is good.
But the Army of Darkness is like one of the overall best movies from the 90s period. Because Bruce Campbell giving these one-liners that
Yeah.
literally nobody else in the universe
Could
could make
pull off.
work.
all right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. This is my boomstick.
Is that why you're randomly grabbing people in public and saying, "Give me some sugar, baby," and kissing them? Just random people. Is that because of that movie?
That's not
Groovy.
appropriate.
Hail to the king, baby.
Were you going to
It's
say
just the
something,
best,
Robbie?
man.
Look like you want to say something.
I think you were winding
Sorry.
up a quote there for a second.
He
It
was
was.
like,
They got ruined.
did I steal the quote you were about to say?
First you say you love me, then you say you hate me.
Yes.
Below.
It is a great film. It's a great action. Bruce Campbell is Bruce Campbell. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate he'll always be typecast as Ash, but Ash is so
Clearly, you haven't seen Burn Notice.
yeah. Well, I've seen Burn Notice. I've seen Jack of all trades, but he's to me he's Ashley. He does such a
I
good
think
job.
he's typecast as Bruce Campbell.
Yeah,
You're right.
he's himself in all films.
We met him. Robbie and I met him, and
We
what did he
did.
say? He talked shit to us.
He made fun of the way we were dressed.
Yeah, he was
Yes.
wearing this purple like velvet
Yeah.
suit.
It was like something
And
Lex
you said
Luthor would have worn in
something- yeah.
1986.
You said something about how snappy he was dressed. He actually looked amazing. He looks
I
fantastic.
complimented
for his age.
him.
And he said what?
He said, "Yeah, that's right. What about you? Bunch of schlubs."
Bunch of schlubs, he called us. And that was one of the greatest.
and we were
moments
like,
of my life.
"Thank you so much."
We're not worthy.
By the way, while we're on the subject of Bruce Campbell, I want everybody to know that you need to read Bruce Campbell's first book that came out years ago. It's called If Chins Could Kill.
Chance could kill.
You've
He
gotta
also
read it.
The
he
joke's
also
on you. His
founded.
first book is actually Leviticus.
Oh wow, that's impressive. He also founded Campbell Soup. Most people don't know that.
Little known fact.
Campbell Soup.
Yeah, and he made a deal with fucking Andy Warhol
He did.
and Marilyn Monroe.
The
We're off what?
we should probably get back to the actual show.
Yeah.
I think we got a couple people left, including Rockin' Robbie.
Oh yeah.
I'm curious your top 5 because you and I think we're kindred spirits. So I think we're gonna have a similar top 5.
I think we're gonna have a different one.
But I think I'm more a Wes Craven fan than you.
Okay, I think so.
So give me your top 5.
Okay.
Just throw it at me. Just shit it on me. What?
Poop it on his chest.
I have an honorable mention.
Oh my God, you fucker!
Yes, we do it.
I would
J-
say we need to edit this out, but you do that.
Joe Dante's Gremlins 2.
Okay. I think I say Joe Dirt.
So
Dude,
I love it.
Gremlins too. Love Joe Dante.
Yeah.
Check out his Facebook, by the way. He posts some awesome shit on there.
By the way, honorable mention. You spent more time on it than me. Okay.
Bang. I
Right.
don't know.
Yeah, never mind. Number 5. Yeah, Gremlins 2 is great.
Gremlins 2 was hilarious.
Number 5.
Talk about meta.
Directed by Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez. 1999, The Blair Witch Project.
You son of a bitch.
I'm serious.
Damn.
Okay, so
But you saw it in the theater. We worked at the
Yeah.
theater together.
I can't watch the movie now and it have the same effect, but the effect that it had when I watched that in the movie, you grow up, you hear people at our age, you hear people be like, "Oh, so you think you like Star Wars? Well, I watched Star Wars on opening night." You know, you can't replace that feeling. Well, you can't replace
Dude,
the
all
feeling
these people that saw the original have throat cancer.
Yeah.
And you're
in my experience, but like no, but you can't replace the experience of watching Blair Witch Project on opening weekend. You can't.
Because everybody thought it was real.
Everybody thought it was real, John.
You didn't think
I-
it was real, though, right?
I thought it was based on a real legend. I didn't think the movie was real, but
You
I thought
think
it was based on a
true
real
events.
legend.
Okay.
Yes. And it's not. It's all fabricated. To me, that movie's genius in marketing. It started this whole, Paranormal Activity and Cloverfield, that stuff doesn't exist without the Blair Witch Project, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that movie is incredibly effective. The first time you watch it in a theater with a full packed theater of rowdy ass kids
Throwing
right?
up.
Like rowdy ass kids. Pominger had to go in there at my showing and quiet everybody down.
Where's that guy? I miss him so much. He was hilarious.
He's dead.
He's not dead.
I'm just kidding.
I feel so
Just kidding.
terrible.
Wow, that was really grim.
This is a 90s horror.
Yeah.
Dark.
Anyway, Blair Witch, you can't. I talked about this on the live stream. You can't replicate that night.
Yeah.
That was the only movie I've ever seen. When the movie was over and everybody walked out, a full theater walked out in utter silence. Most people going, "What the fuck did I just see?" And other people going, "What the fuck did I just see?" I
remember a lot of suicides after that.
I was
in
at the
theater.
ladder. Wow, Pominger, one of them. Anyway,
Jesus, I gotta look him on Facebook. I hope he's doing okay.
my number 4 is directed by Mikey Takashi. That's Audition from 1999.
Okay.
Same year. Audition is a great film. The Japanese horror thing started really moving in with things like Ringu, which
is 98.
which has been mentioned. Reggie
Yeah.
mentioned that one, so that's really cool. But to me, I really love Audition. That movie is really cool. I love the way it kind of says something social, because it's about this woman who's like preying on these men who are only preying on her to be like a potential wife or something like that. But like the movie is very tense and very creepy, and the music. When we did the music segment, I should have mentioned the music in Audition, because the music is so effective. Do you remember like seeing the bag of bodies move during that one bit? You've seen this movie, right?
I've never seen this film.
Are you serious?
I'll be straight up with you.
You
Usually
have
I
to watch
lie
it.
about shit on the show.
Wait,
but I
it's a
haven't seen it.
Japanese horror film?
Yes.
Yeah,
I haven't
Audition.
seen it either.
It's
and I'm a pretty big weeb.
Miki Takashi, like the guy that did Itchy the Killer.
I know what that is.
Oh yeah, dude, you have to
Did he
watch
also do
Audition.
Itchy and Scratchy? Is that the same guy?
No, Audition's amazing. My number 3,
didn't see
1992, Sam Raimi, Army of Darkness.
Army of
Yeah.
motherfucking Darkness.
That was one of my favorite movies ever growing up. It was the first one of the Evil Dead movies that I ever saw. I didn't realize that
Yeah,
there were
I started
other
with Army of
movies.
Darkness as well.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Me
You
too. I think
borrowed my
everybody.
damn special edition VHS and you damaged it. Remember that? Like it got caught in my player.
Yeah.
And you had to pull it out, and it was always damaged. And I'm like, that son of a bitch is me worth something. You know what's worth now? Nothing. It's a fucking VHS.
But I will tell you this, the Evil Dead franchise are the movies that I have bought the most, from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Absolutely. Number 2, 1996, Wes Craven, Scream.
Oh,
Good
yeah.
call.
I love
Good
Scream.
call.
It's amazing. It's a quintessential slasher horror film, but it really obviously self-aware. Like we talked about, it is Wes Craven realizing that the time of the 70s and 80s has passed, and now it's time to reflect on that and what it actually means and what it actually means to mythology, right? And what story means to that. I love it. New Nightmare's really good, but to me, I really like Scream. It just still
Scream
has
is phenomenal.
Scream has the thrills for me and a great soundtrack. My number 1 movie, Steve Miner directed this one in 1998. It's Halloween H2O. I'm not
I
even kidding.
knew
Nice.
H2 would make your top 5, so I was
I-
really surprised you hadn't mentioned it yet.
Out of all the movies in the 90s that are horror, and there's so many great ones. Sixth Sense, right? Gremlins 2, right? I got other on my list that I got knocked out. Two Evil Eyes, The Dark Half, right? 7, amazing movies. Scream 2, which is probably just as good as Scream 1. In fact, I
is.
could actually say my number 2 is a tie between Scream and Scream 2.
Cheater.
Ah.
Anyway.
But Halloween
But-
H2O to me is the one I watched the most. It's my favorite soundtrack.
But is Halloween your favorite horror franchise?
No.
It's up there.
My
towards the
favorite
top,
horror
though.
franchise is probably something like the Universal Horror Dracula or
Okay.
something like that. But
I know Halloween's up there for you. Big Halloween
out
fan.
of Freddy and Jason, it's definitely Mike. But I do like Pinhead better than Mike. But I think Halloween has more better films. More better? Mo better films than the Hellraiser franchise. Do you get
I think
what I'm
only
saying?
his friends call
easy.
him Mike. Are you friends with Michael Myers?
Yeah, anyway.
That's not a hard
No,
comparison.
I just love this film so much. It takes a lot from Scream, but I like it better than Scream because it's Michael Myers. Yeah, so absolutely.
You don't have
And-
any qualms with that the mask changes halfway through the film,
I
and that they
hate-
tried to fix it with CG.
I hate that the mask doesn't cover his entire neck. That's the only problem I have with it.
But it's a great cast.
It needs to end there. There's a perfect Halloween trilogy. You ready for this? Halloween 4.
Oh, you skipped over the one with the
Well,
mask.
here's the thing.
Halloween 3.
Well, I was
Susan and the
going to
Witch?
say the only ones I actually think are really good are 1, 3, 4, and H2O.
3's the return, right? That one's people. Wait a minute. Oh, that's not.
4's
That's
the return.
Trick or Treat.
That's the one with little
Okay.
Jamie. I like
4's the
I like
return
4.
that people love. Okay,
I like 3. I think Season of the Witch is a really
but
good
it doesn't
movie.
really go with that.
No, none at
Yeah.
all.
That's the one I like the most.
Number
3.
2 is necessary for H2O to make sense.
Yeah.
Because it introduces the sister idea. But I don't like part 2 near as much. But anyway, the perfect trilogy would be 1, 2, and that one. And you skip Jamie. But I think Halloween 4 is amazing. But H2O is amazing. I love it. I love the music. LL makes it through the fucking movie.
Yeah.
Right? And it's got dreamy ass, what's his name? Josh Hamilton?
Hartnett.
Oh,
with that
Josh
cowlick
Hartnett's in
that
it.
never dies.
I think
He's
Josh
so
Hamilton was a
skinny.
president.
Is LL
I
Cool
think
J
so.
like? Is LL Cool J like the filmographer? Isn't he filming everything? He's part
No.
of
No, he's
He's
the
a security
security
guard.
guard.
Okay.
For the school, because it takes place at a school.
And he's
Okay.
trying to write like these erotic romance novels on the side.
By the way, was it LL Cool J that got murdered at the beginning of Scream 2? Who was that?
No, LL Cool J is not in the Scream films.
The beginning of Scream 2 was Omar Epps, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
It was Omar Epps and Will Smith. Jada
He's in it for
Smith.
all of 2 minutes.
Yeah, and Jada Pinkett.
He gets killed in the bathroom, doesn't he, at the theater?
But that's my top 5.
It was a good top
That's a good top
And
five.
they parody that in one of the scary
Yeah.
Scary
movie
movie.
movies when he
Yeah.
gets a
Dildo.
dick through the.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, the Scary Movie franchise. The first 3
Yeah.
are great.
We
I
had
wish
to
those
like.
were 90s because those are
We worked
phenomenal.
at the theater. At
Yes.
least we worked at the theater. We had to like card people as they were going into the theater
because of the
because of the dick through
We
the
had
ear.
so many kids trying to get in there. Hilarious. Not 90s, but funny stuff. Great top 5. I'm surprised by some of the films on there. Like I didn't expect Audition, but I'm not surprised that Halloween H2O is on there. Since you're a Michael Myers guy.
I just love that, and that's one of my favorite Halloween movies.
I remember when it came out. Were you working in the theater at the time? Because I was.
No, I wasn't, but it was the first Halloween film I ever saw in the theater.
They stealthily filmed that and kept her being in it as a secret.
Jamie
so it was,
Lee Curtis?
so it was a big fucking deal. Her return to the franchise.
It was a big deal, dude. And I remember
It
how
was a
big of a deal it
huge
was,
deal.
and I really think that movie captures the point of the franchise the best.
I love the fact that it's H2O because it's based on 20 years, but at the same time, it wasn't like on a boat or anything. You know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
not aquatic at all.
Yeah, and it's also got the dude from Third Rock in it. That was in he was in Dark Knight Rises, and he was in
Joseph
Inception.
Gordon-Levitt?
Yeah, Joseph
Yeah.
Gordon-Levitt.
He's in that?
Yeah, he's one of the kids that gets I don't think he gets killed at the very beginning.
Yeah.
The street hockey
And he
players or
steals-
whatever.
He steals the beers from
Yeah.
the fridge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His
From
greatest
the
film,
nurse.
by the way, Looper. If you haven't seen it, Looper's
I
phenomenal.
haven't.
Have you seen Looper?
Heard the
Holy
name.
shit.
Isn't he like young?
He's
Bruce
young Bruce
Willis?
Willis.
Yeah,
But he
that's so
does. He
weird.
does a great Bruce Willis impression.
What's your top 5, John?
My top 5. First off, we'll start with a no, I'm not with the bullshit, but honorable mention or whatever. My number 5, slightly different than yours, but again, some overlap. Number 5, Halloween H2O. I think it's a good film. I think it's got a great cast. I think it was a pretty big fucking deal for it to come back, and they kept it a secret for a long ass time. It wasn't like they promoted it year beforehand, or there was leaked images of, hey, she's returned to the franchise. So it was a pretty fucking big deal that she came back. I like H2O, but it has its flaws. They tried too hard to be the teen centric, focus on the popularity of the other films had, like Scream.
And it's got George Clooney light in it.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, it's like they made a mask that wasn't close, and then they changed the mask towards the ends of the film, but it's jarring, and they tried to fix it in CG, but it looks blurry. I don't know. I wish they would have gone with a better mask, but I still enjoy the film, and it was still really cool to see in the theater. That was the first Halloween film I saw in the theater because I was too young for the previous films.
Same.
And I was on a date, and this girl was freaking out, never saw a Halloween film, and so she kept pushing up against me the whole time because she was freaking out, and it was amazing.
See, I didn't have my first movie dates until the next year, and it was Lethal Weapon 4 and Armageddon. But I saw Lethal Weapon 4 with 2 different dates.
I bet Armageddon's
Nice.
probably a pretty good date movie. It feels like
It was. It
yeah,
worked.
that feels like a pretty good date movie. I don't think I was old enough to be dating at that time.
I think I was more emotionally distraught at the end of the movie, though. I was like, no, Ben Affleck. Oh, he's safe. Don't worry.
Oh no. Also,
I had a big crush on Ben Affleck back then. I think I still do.
I can see that.
I cried.
I think I still do.
Ben
He's-
Affleck's
he's a-
pretty. He's
he's a-
pretty hunky.
Yeah. He's a
And,
handsome
and I
fella.
hated to see Bruce Willis go because he's part of one of my favorite 90s movies, Hudson Hawk. I'll die on that fucking mountain.
And Danny Aiello.
Yes.
Great cast.
Yes.
Talk about a great film. Not a horror film.
What do you think? Okay, I haven't seen the new Halloween film, but it completely unwrites H2O.
Yeah, it
Do you like that one
writes
better
everything.
than H2O? Is that one
Yes.
better than H2O?
Oh my God, yes.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
No, I'm not even joking.
H2O is the greatest 90s horror film.
Yeah, but it's a better film. No, but it's a better film.
Okay.
It's a much better film.
Okay, I'll check it out.
So number 4, The Sixth Sense. Here's a
I'm
film.
glad somebody said that.
Here's a film that I worked at the theater when it came out.
Yeah.
I never saw it at the theater.
It was in there even after the DVD came out, John. It was still at our theater.
Yeah, we had it for a long time.
Yeah.
So I ended up watching it at home with my lady friend, and I was blown away by the twist. She's like, "Oh, this was so predictable." I'm like, "I did not see that goddamn twist."
She must have heard that shit.
This is
Get
the
the fuck
first.
out of my
This
house.
is the
Yeah,
first
you
time.
leave.
This is like the first like big film for M. Night Shyamalan, and
And his best.
it is terrifying.
It's
so,
all
'cause you
downhill
don't know
from
what's
there.
you don't.
Well,
it
Unbreakable's
is.
great.
I like Unbreakable. I like Signs, but
Yeah, rewatch them.
yeah, Unbreakable gets
I like
Unbreakable
Signs.
was ruined by that shitty sequel. Anyway,
Glass is terrible.
Glass is.
I haven't seen it yet.
Some people see the glass as half empty. I see it as a shitty film.
Ah.
So
That's a great film.
it didn't expect the twist, but also you go back and watch it, and it's so bizarre and dark.
Yeah.
It's so well acted, and it's amazing film.
It's so subtle
yeah,
and depressing.
it is very depressing
It's
and very
morose.
bizarre.
I
You
mean,
know?
think about how depressing that the motherfucker finds out he's dead. He's still been going
Yeah,
to
and
work
he's been
for several
shot.
years.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You know, like Delaney just
Ooh.
posted that thing the other day, and it was like, the
that's
thing about the Sixth Sense that would piss me off if I was a ghost is realizing I found out I was dead and still been going to work.
Yeah, if there's a way to like kill
That's
your
the
ghost
most-
self, I would
yeah,
kill my ghost self.
That's the
after
most
finding that.
real statement about a 90s horror movie I've heard yet.
My number 3 is Scream 2.
Nice.
Cruise Control. It's
Mm.
it's a great cast. It's great to see Arquette come back and Courtney Cox, to see that cast come back, especially you think he might have died after the first one.
And
You
Nev
don't-
Campbell.
Yeah, Nev Campbell, the whole cast
Sydney.
returns. It's a great. The bad guy in it is great. I know the guy's a dick, but
Timothy Olyphant.
fucking Robbie loves
The
Timothy. Olyphant.
dreamy ass Timothy Olyphant.
So it's a great cast. It's a great film. It's a great follow up. It came out fucking the next year. Scream came out in '96. This came out in '97. So this is a fast sequel, but it was done right. It's in the soundtrack. Holy shit, is that a good soundtrack?
when
we talked
she
about it
has
before.
to shoot Jerry O'Connell.
Oh, not Jerry
oh
O'Connell.
my god.
No.
And then you're like, guess what, Nev? Not the killer. You're wrong,
Wait, she
Sydney. She shoots him.
She thinks it's Jerry O'Connell.
No,
she thinks
doesn't
he's the
shoot
killer.
him.
Yes, she does.
Oh.
No, she doesn't.
She shoots him right in the chest.
I just
Yeah.
watched
Does
it
she not?
today.
I thought she shot him in the chest
Who
as
shoots
well.
him in the chest?
No, Timothy Olyphant does.
Oh, maybe
But
she
she
hesitates,
almost does, though.
and he shoots.
She,
Who here?
How
raise
did
your
I get that
hand.
twisted?
Who here hasn't shot Jerry O'Connell in the chest?
I mean,
Oh.
I might have by accident.
I did it for charity. Okay. My number 2 would be Scream, the first Scream.
Ah,
I remember seeing it in the theater.
I know his number one.
I remember how
Scream Zero.
graphic. I remember how graphic it was because I'm like, man, because they seem to sanitize horror films and Screams, even though it was not crazy over the top, but the actual stabbings
Yeah.
seemed like real stabbings.
Also, you thought Drew Barrymore was the star of this movie.
Yes,
Yeah.
like a Drew Barrymore film produced and starring Drew Barrymore. So it's a great concept. That's also got a great cast. I love it. I'm a Wes Craven fan.
Dude, talking about the stabbing scenes in that movie, the end where the two guys are stabbing each other in the kitchen to make it look like they were attacked.
You were telling
or
me you
whatever.
did
It's
that
like
at a
one of the-
party for shits and gigs when you were
Yeah,
drunk.
because I saw it in a movie. Exactly.
With old
Movies
Skeet
influence
Matt.
I'm easily influenced by media.
Yeah.
I just wish I knew Skeet Ulrich. I mean, what's up, Skeet?
It's got to be hard to
Skeet.
stab somebody. And like,
Yeah.
okay, you got to stab me. We're going to pretend like we got... That's got to be difficult. Like
It's such
knowing
a
you're going
cool
to be
scene.
stabbed.
Yeah.
It's a fucking bizarre scene.
Oh,
but, okay.
yeah, not cool's the wrong word.
I'm
Good,
not... I don't
guess.
trust you anymore, Goldsmith.
It's acted great.
So why did you buy me that knife for Christmas anyway? Number 1 would be Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Which-
of
Nice.
course.
Which I
Mm.
guess I kind of...
So Army of Dark. You don't think Army of Darkness is a horror film?
I love Army of Darkness, but it's too slapstick. And maybe make my number 6. I do love Army of Darkness. I've watched it so many goddamn times.
Yeah.
It's a great film. I love Bruce Campbell.
You got to draw a line though, making your top 5.
Yeah.
And that's the line you drew.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it's Wes Craven heavy, But I love Wes Craven. I'll never be ashamed of my Wes Craven.
Before you get to
fanness.
that, before you get to why, no Silence of the Lambs from anybody.
I don't think it's that great. It's all right.
I had to take it off as not a horror movie. It is,
It's
but
a psychological.
I mean, like
Yeah.
Hannibal
Exactly.
Lecter's scary and all, but like as a movie, I don't know. It's hard to sit through. It's not that it's like gory or scary. It's just slow.
If I was doing a top 5 best, it may be on there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we were doing top 5 favorites, and that's the
Yeah.
difference, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
When
Why
I
is
was
that your number
making
one?
when I was making my top 5, I decided that anybody who was in a film was eliminated from the top 5 if they wrote Wicked Game. So therefore, he's in Silence of the Lambs for like 2 minutes. I forgot his name. Musician. What's that musician's name? Wicked Game. Chris Isaac. Thank you. Fuck. I like Chris Isaac, but anyway, as a person, not necessarily his music. It was just I like the meta-ness, but
With
it was nice to
you.
see. It was nice to see Robert Englund reprise the role.
Yes.
It's nice to see Wes Craven on film
Do
playing
you like
himself.
the claw?
I like the claw.
It's different. I like it.
I like to see Nancy come back and take the role back.
Yeah.
It's just the cast. I mean, it was if you're a Freddy fan, it was like your wet dream. Like, hey, we're gonna bring everybody back and even Nancy, and we're gonna do a sequel, and it's super meta, and like, oh, geez, oh, Pete. I mean, it was.
And Wes Craven's in it
Wes Craven's in it.
as
Wes Craven.
And Robert Englund plays Freddy and
Wes,
Robert.
Yeah.
And
And
Freddie
it
plays
was
himself. Freddie, each credited is himself in the credits.
It's such a good film.
It's super
And,
meta.
Yeah. And I think it was so great after I like some of the films aren't by him. But as far as the Freddy franchises go, the best ones are ones he's involved with. And him coming back and basically bookending the series and be like, hey, we're going to do it right. So good. By the way, the Wes Craven, Craven's family, Craven's estate, just got the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise back. So it now belongs to the Craven estate. So his family owns the rights to it. So New Line no longer does. So we'll see what happens with it in the future. But I have really good, I have faith in the family more so than I didn't like the shitty remake. And I think most people did.
No, it's trash. It's not good.
So I think now that the family has the rights to the film, I'm really excited to see the direction of the franchise. Should they choose to revive it? They don't have to probably, but
Yeah.
so
They need
hopefully
to bring that kid back if they do. He was one of my favorite like '90s kid actors. He was in Kindergarten Cop.
Yeah.
Boys have a penis, girls have a vagina.
It's not a tumor.
I learned
Yeah.
something today on the show. Okay, we're gonna go to final thoughts, but just for you guys to know, people listening, if you're anticipating the next episode, it is gonna be a Michael Keaton episode.
It will
I
be
keep
6
pushing
hours
it.
long.
No, it's gonna be a video games episode. You're probably thinking to yourself, listening to the show, hey, you guys aren't a video game podcast, but fuck it, we're doing it.
But you know what? We'll also be talking about our favorite video game movies and TV shows.
Yeah, and our favorite video game, maybe in pop culture because it's definitely influenced pop culture.
Yeah, but if you've listened to the Nintendo podcast, you pretty much know my top 5 video games.
Robbie doesn't play a lot of new games.
I might throw Pong on there because I
Oh.
finally started beating it earlier this year.
Mine might be Zelda heavy.
Hmm.
I'm just throwing that out there because it's the greatest franchise of all time.
Like in all media.
Yes,
You know what? I'm surprised there hasn't been a Zelda movie.
because Nintendo will not give up the rights.
I'm
Nintendo's
surprised.
been since the Mario debacle.
Yeah, I can see why.
Nintendo has been very guarded of their property.
They're like, no movies.
and Zelda is a big property for them, so they don't want to burn bridges.
Well, Mario's doing fine.
No,
Yeah.
I'm saying they're guarded with that.
Not if
Yeah.
they make another movie like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
they're
that'd be
very
it.
guarded.
Especially in 2019. Oh boy.
Although they've made some good choices because the new Pokemon was actually really good. Detective Pikachu was good, and
Yeah, that was good.
and Nintendo had to prove that.
That was a
Yeah,
good
so
movie.
just get Danny DeVito to play Link and it'd be good.
Why not just make a Super Mario CG animated film?
Well, they're working with Universal, and apparently Universal will make a completely not CG animated Mario film.
That's cool too.
So
That'd
we'll
be
see
okay.
what happens.
But
They
don't
were
do it
working
live
with-
action.
Yeah,
No, we can't do
They're
that.
doing an animated film.
You could do Zelda live action without problems. I don't know about Mario.
You could do Zelda very much like a Lord of the Rings
But
exactly.
type thing.
Are you going to watch a 2.5-hour movie? I don't know why it's so long.
We'll talk more about
Where
that
he
next
doesn't,
time.
where he doesn't talk. Link doesn't talk in the games. Okay,
He'd have to talk in the movie, John. You'd
Well,
have to get over that.
No, I'm saying it's not. Nintendo
You'd
won't let
have
it
to
happen.
get over that.
Nintendo won't let it happen.
Oh, that's stupid.
I'm saying
It's
it never.
stupid as hell.
It'll never become a movie because
There's so much
they're-
lore there.
Yeah, but they're so guarded with their
Hey,
franchises.
do a Metroid movie. Fuck, do a Kirby movie.
I would love that.
Anyway, we'll talk about that next time.
Okay, we'll talk about that next time. Closing thoughts. Talk about 90s movies, how they moved you, how they changed you. What do you think of them? I'll start with Jeremie Day,
Yeah.
who's about to transition to Jeremie Knight. It's very late.
Yeah, I mean, it's not past my bedtime. I'm a grown man. Anyway,
It is getting there.
It's getting there though.
I go to bed at 2 p.m. every day.
By the way, this is a weeknight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Wednesday day.
I've been pronouncing it wrong for years.
Yeah, I know. I know the true meaning of the day because I am a day. Anyway,
What?
Okay, Day Man, tell us your final
Anyway,
thoughts.
90s horror is very definitive of its era. Like, there's no other era that came after like that, and even before we had our slasher films, but they were like the progenitor to what was coming. Like Wes Craven was like, "Hey, I'm gonna redefine all this, you guys." We had Scream and all those films. Like, there was a very, like I said, it's very distinctive compared to other horror eras. We got a lot of movies that also led us to like the early 2000s style of filming and early. Justin just fucked up a thing here. But basically it led us into like a whole new like with the found footage with Blair Witch. We wouldn't have had like Chronicle or Paranormal Activity without that. So there was like just a whole definitive part of the 90s that made it very special, I think, at the time, and it helped define some stuff going forward in film, in horror films specifically.
90s was special. Speaking of special people, Goldsmith.
Hey.
He is special to me.
Aww.
Are you gonna ask the question?
I was staring longingly into your eyes. I got distracted. And that mustache. He's got a great Mario mustache, by the way, right now. So it's you, Goldsmith. What do you think? 90s movies, what's your closing thoughts?
My closing thoughts on this podcast are The Night Flyer by Stephen King is a good movie.
I would
Fight me.
I will grant you that.
I don't know this.
I'll fight you over this.
Miguel
We're gonna fight in here.
It's better than Tommy Knockers.
Well,
That's not hard to
that's
beat.
setting a really low fucking bar.
Just saying.
Dude, it's so good. Miguel Ferrer.
Did you see that image I put
so
up by
good.
Francavilla about the Night Flyer on the PCP Army yesterday?
No.
Francisco Francavilla is a comic book artist who does an image a day every October for Inktober, something comic book artists do, where they try to do an image a day. He does horror related. This year, it's all Stephen King.
Yeah.
He did a Night Flyer one. It's amazing. I'll show it to you.
Oh, please do. But that's a good movie, and if you hadn't seen it, you should watch it because it's good. Don't be disappointed by the end.
I'll
Lies.
allow it.
Hardcore lies. Don't listen to that.
Robbie,
Yeah.
closing statements.
Well, the 90s horror films may have seemed a little cleaned up. They may have seemed a little cliche at times. They may have seemed a little too led into the idea of that we can hide the fact that it's a horror film if we call it a psychological thriller. But I do like them. I think it's a very definitive statement. I don't think it's as strong as, say, the 70s or the 80s. Or the 2000s even. I'm very excited, actually, in the future to do a 2000s horror podcast.
Oh, we're about to close out.
Maybe next
The
Halloween, right?
2000s.
We're close to
Wait.
2010s, John.
Yeah, John. You're way
Wait,
behind.
wait a minute.
Anyway,
I gotta get a new calendar.
I think they're great films. I think Wes Craven dominated this era of film, and I really think it's because he took a look at what made horror movies, and kind of made fun of it, and at the same time reinvented it with Scream and New Nightmare. And I think the 90s horror films, especially with Blair Witch, Sixth Sense, they started becoming a little bit more filled with notoriety. These are some of the first horror films outside of The Exorcist that really got serious Academy Award acknowledgement. The Sixth Sense, Silence of the Lambs won Best Picture, even though it's a psychological thriller. But I love this era of film. I think it's great, and we'll be...
Didn't Seven win an award as well?
Probably for creepiest Kevin Spacey. Except for in real life. But
Yeah, I don't know. Real Kevin Spacey is scarier.
but
Oh,
and
shit.
be sure to join us over at patreon.com/PCP for the PCP After Hours, where we'll be talking about a lot of fun Halloween stuff.
Yeah, I have nothing else. really a great decade of film. We have some cool concepts. We have some new film types emerging. What do you think about, like, we talked about the found footage and the Japanese film starting to make it over here, and so we have that, and that's towards the end of the 90s. But they sanitized some of the films, and maybe it was over teen centric, and maybe every other film was written by Kevin Williamson, but it was still a great decade for films. They gave us Scream. Yeah. They gave us A New Nightmare. It feels like that that Wes Craven had his almost like second wind. And he had some great, he had great films in the 70s and great 80s, but he definitely found a new audience in the 90s.
Yeah, and a resurgence.
I'm grateful for that. That's because he teamed up with, of all things, like motherfucker writing for Dawson's Creek. If you would have told me that before, I'd be like, no, that doesn't make any sense. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Tune in next time for the Video Games Podcast. Check us out on, we're on iTunes, we're on the website, download us. Maybe you've already, that's how you're listening to us now, I don't know. If you're on iTunes, check out the website. There's a lot more content on there, including Robbie's videos. Check out the YouTube channel. We have a store. Check out the store. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll check you out. Same Freddy channel, same Freddy time. And be careful when you go to sleep tonight, because Freddy may get you. He may get you in your dreams.
Bitch.